Okay, Jean, is Ms. Grijalva on? She is, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the August 23rd TUSD Governing Board meeting. Can we establish roll call? Wait, right? Establish roll call, thank you.
Dr. Ravi?
Here.
Ms. Shaw?
Here.
Ms. Counts?
Here.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Here.
Ms. Grijalva?
Here.
Thank you. And Ms. Grijalva will be joining us via Zoom or via call this evening. So, and Zoom. Thank you, Ms. Grijalva. Okay. Land acknowledgement statement. And do we have the student? Jordan?
Hello, I'm
Hi.
here.
Hi, Jordan. So thank you for joining us. I appreciate you coming to our meeting after school. So I am going to read a little bit about you to our audience. This is Jordan Hart. She's a senior at UHS. She's a student athlete where she started the Black Student Union and serves as co-president. She's an advocate for social justice and serving others through leadership and community service. She served on the Youth Advisory Councils for Unidas and the Metropolitan Education Commission. She has volunteered with the Pima County Teen Court, IMU 360, and the Ronald McDonald House. Nationally, she served as the teen treasurer for the Far West region of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated, overseeing 28 chapters in 6 states, and represented the state of Arizona at the On the Hill Summit in Washington, D.C. to engage with Arizona's elected leaders. She is also the recipient of the MLK Youth Drum Major Award. That is great. So whenever you are ready, Jean, you want to put up the land acknowledgement statement? And any time, Jordan.
Thank you. On behalf of the Governing Board of Tucson Unified School District, I, Jordan Hart, acknowledge that the schools, buildings, and facilities of the Tucson Unified School District reside on the ancestral homeland of the Tohono O'odham Nation and federally recognized tribal land of the Pascua Yaqui tribe. Thank you.
Thank you, and good luck this year, and good luck next year when you're off to college.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have Katerina. She is Katerina Munoz. She's an 8th grader at Lawrence. And I'm going to read a short bio. Katerina is the current president of the Lawrence Student Council. She is looking forward to participating in sports again this year. She's on both the soccer and track team. She also loves to draw, sing, and babysit her niece, Maya. So and we are doing the Pledge of Allegiance. So when we are ready, Jean?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Katerina. And good luck on the rest of your 8th grade year. Okay. Agenda adjustments. Dr. Trujillo?
Yes, Clerk Luna Rose, members of the governing board, I'd like to recommend that item 3.1, awards and recognitions, if we can move it to after the call to the audience. We're just waiting on some additional information.
Okay. Board members, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if, and maybe I could ask legal too, I would like to pull a couple items, 7.3 and 7.4, to give the public more time to review the PIA.
Okay. Mr. Ross, how does that work?
So the request is to just remove items from the agenda?
Correct, for our next meeting.
Well, that could be either a vote of the board, or if there's no objection, then the chair could just say without objection. So.
Okay. Governing board members, any objection?
Objection.
Okay. I think we will keep this as is in the action items.
Because of one objection?
Well, I also object as well.
Okay.
Is that enough?
Ms. Luna Rose, when the item comes up, the board can also vote whether to delay it to another meeting as well.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so if we've moved 3.1, we are now at board member activity reports. Board members, anything that you would like to let the community know what you've been doing concerning the district?
I would like to let people know what I've been doing in the district.
Sure, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. So I had the privilege of visiting McGee Middle School again, walking down the halls, talking with students and teachers. Also had a meeting at South Tucson City Hall with some politicians down there, also some administrators from our district concerning some safety issues at our South Tucson schools. That day I also went and visited Mission View, which is a beautiful campus. And then more recently, I went down to Booth Fickett. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Shaw.
Thank you, Ms. Luna Rose. I had a privilege of joining the holiday community right before the school year started for their grand reopening event. There was some funding that came in to renovate the facilities with new flooring, new painting, and just some great renovations throughout the campus, and was really pleased to see what that's going to mean for the community down in the southwest part of Tucson where Holiday is located. And I was able to bring my kids and have some bounce houses and face painting and some other adventures for them as well. So it was really privileged to be able to get down to Holiday for that event. And of course, as all of us are parents in the district, having my kids on their campuses and visiting their campuses for the first day of school was a thrilling experience, as it always is.
Thank you. I would like to add that I too visited just on one campus recently, Rincon. We did the open house. Thanks to Ms. Welch and her staff for having a very smooth open house for a very humid day. It was really interesting, and it's been a long time since I myself have been walking around campus in the eyes of a student. I also attended the PTA meeting, Rincon PTA, so if there's, they are in need of members, and I will encourage Rincon parents, if you're listening or here at the meeting tonight, to attend the next meeting. You can go to the website and they'll have all the information for you. And lastly, attended the audit committee, TUSD audit committee meeting last week. And it's always good to hear from concerned community members and trying to be as transparent as possible to the community. Anything else, board members?
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, Ms. Grajava.
Yeah, so I worked with Spark to have a fundraiser for sports physicals for our students. Visited Holiday the day after, I think, of the grand opening with Dr. Trujillo and Associate Superintendent Alvarez, and we welcomed Kathy Hoffman on campus, and that was great. And Dr. Strozer they did such an amazing job at Holiday, so I'm so excited for the students there. I attended the Juneteenth Community Awards, and Ms. Shaw was there as a committee member for Juneteenth, so it was good to see both of us there and for that wonderful community that worked together for Juneteenth. I visited Utterback and had a nice tour with the principal and also with Jansen Azarias from Higher Ground. And it's a really beautiful campus, and we just need to continue to support their efforts there. I attended a viewing of a sneak preview of Mariachi Miracle that Dan Buckley has been working on for about 10 years. And it was really good to see our the mariachi instructors from our schools there, Rudy Valenzuela with Ross Gruge and Mirna Salinas, and Jaime Valenzuela was there. Mariachi Aslan played, and we also had Rayos del Sol from Tucson High there with Justin Enriquez, their director. That was nice. We had an emergency board meeting on August 16th, and I wanted to thank Ms. Luna Rose and Ms. Shaw for attending that emergency board meeting. And then I spoke at the junior achievement meeting, and there were quite a few questions about TUSD and the services that we provide. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, not hearing anything else, we'll move on to call to the audience. Okay. During the call to the audience, the board clerk will recognize speakers and maintain order by setting appropriate limitations. The governing board is committed to the safety of the entire TUSD community. The following procedures related to the call to the audience portion of the board meetings will be observed. All public comments for the meeting were accepted by either emailing or calling the board office to have names added to the list, or by emailing written comments to be read into the record by noon of the day of the meeting. If public comments were sent in, they will be read into the record by staff. Individuals addressing the board should observe rules of propriety and good conduct and refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. TUSD serves students from all ages, so speakers should be aware that children may be present or listening. Our staff will make sure each board member receives a copy of all written comments. At the conclusion of the call of the audience, the governing board president will ask if individual board members wish to respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the board, wish to ask staff to review a matter, or wish to ask that a matter be put forth on a future agenda. By law, at most, 2 board members can address any single issue raised during the call to the audience. Okay. Our first person this evening is Jennifer Earle.
Good evening. You'll recall that I came and spoke during the same comment period 2 meetings ago, and then I was out of town last time, and so I sent in written comments. For people viewing online, just to catch people up, I originally came out of a concern about busing for my specific daughter, but I return here today with continued concerns about busing more generally, and also concerns about transparency. As you may recall at that first meeting, in the response period that you all have, the superintendent suggested that I contact his office. I did so and was promised a reply. I never received a reply from that office. I also talked to Martha, the director of transportation, as my partner also did. We spoke to her together. And ultimately, after a while, she did give us a call back. She called my partner and said, sorry, there's just nothing that can be done. And I hadn't mentioned this in the comment last time, but I will note that when she was delivering that news to my partner said, we're going to continue coming to school board meetings. And Martha said something to the effect of, that won't do any good for anyone. And then, sort of said, like, basically didn't seem to like that idea. So now let me tell you what's happened since I last sent in my written comment. We've had no contact from the superintendent's office or Martha, but my daughter's busing schedule has gotten worse. So her hub schedule has actually been moved back. Before it was a 10-hour hub-to-hub day for her. Now it's a minimum of a 10.5-hour day for her because her morning time has been scooted back. And I understand that some of the board members or all of the board members were led to believe that they couldn't talk to me about this because somehow I didn't have standing. So I want to clarify that. My partner, I've been co-parenting my daughter for 7 years, and I'm on her emergency contact list. My partner has offered to sign whatever mysterious paperwork might be necessary. Martha actually spoke to both of us together and so was aware that I was speaking with with my partner's consent. And you could have called us or reached out to her. So to me, standing back from this, I raise a concern, I continue to raise a concern. Things actually get worse for my daughter. And then the ability for me to be spoken to about this gets challenged. Certainly, there are multiple explanations for this, but one of them doesn't look very good. I want to encourage you to think about this as a transparency issue now, not just a busing issue, and I promise I'll be back next time too. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Anthony Delgado.
Hello and good evening, Governing Board of TUSD. I had a couple of quick questions for you folks. I've filed a Freedom of Information Act regarding school athletic fields and the funding of the fields, particularly schools on the south and west side of town, Choya High School, Pueblo High School, and Tucson High School. We're asking that the board look into the possibility of maybe simplifying the information on where money is allocated, how much money is being spent at any one particular field, and if this is also possible. My second question is, how is TUSD allocating funds to each high school for their CTE budgets? Where can we locate that information? And where can we find how much each school is being financed and funded for, particularly construction, welding, and automotive? That's it. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next is Kira Salentis.
Dear members of the board, I urge you not to adopt to propose policy BEDH, revising the board policies on the call to the audience. The proposed policy quashes individual voices. Just because certain people have similar opinions doesn't mean that they agree on every facet of an issue. If only one individual is allowed to speak on an issue, then the severity of important issues can be easily overlooked. Governing Board Policy A states the district is committed to inclusion and non-discrimination in all district activities. At all times, district staff should work to ensure that staff, parents, students, and members of the public are included and welcome to participate in district activities. If only one person is allowed to speak on an issue, representation from each of these stakeholders cannot speak and share their unique perspectives on important issues involving our community and schools. Please continue to allow everyone to have a voice in TUSD board meetings and do not adopt policy BEDH. Thank you, Kira Salentis.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Kiana Mattinson.
Governing board members, I respectfully request that agenda items 7.3 and 7.4 on the board agenda of August 23, 2022 be delayed and moved to a meeting in late September or early October 2022. Only after stakeholders and members of the public are made aware of the new process in place to provide public comment regarding TUSD's post-unitary status plan. I have spoken with parents and teachers from several schools. Not a single person is aware of the process for the public to provide input or comment on desegregation matters that are under consideration for action by the governing board. Some teachers approached their principals who knew nothing about this new process. The same is true for family engagement leadership at the schools. How can parents or members of the public be expected to comment on issues posted on the TUSD website if no guidance or information is provided to parents or the public about what, when, where, and how to find information? Stakeholders should not be expected to search through the TUSD website daily just in case something is posted which impacts specific student populations. As I am sure you are aware, Black students, Latinx, and disabled students have been represented within DAPE at high rates. The 4-year evaluation on DAPE showed success for the student populations being served. However, last school year, the service model was drastically changed, which created chaos for DAPE students and educational providers involved in the program within DAPE and at the schools. These are 2 documents relevant to the agenda items. One is 148 pages, and the other is 7 pages. Unfortunately, neither is written for a layperson to comprehend quickly. I only learned about the documents yesterday in the late afternoon, and am still making my way in deciphering the documents. Right now, I am under the very concerned impression that what is proposed in the noted agenda items is remarkably and frightfully similar to last August's debacle with DAPE. The current proposal allows DAPE teachers to be pulled from their DAPE assignments and placed elsewhere. I cannot think of another programmatic area in TUSD where this is allowed to occur. As an African American activist, I am very concerned about the ongoing frenzy that has been imposed regarding DAPE since the start of last year. Especially high at-risk students who would benefit from DAPE's successful model have been left out of the cold for more than a year. What is remarkably blatant is that most of the DAPE exceptionally high at-risk students are Black, brown, and/or disabled, and are also characterized as being underserved. Please give parents and the public adequate time to review the items mentioned above so they are given the opportunity to provide thoughtful feedback before the board takes action. I am not able to attend the meeting. However, what is submitted in this email should be within the call to the audience record. Sincerely, Kiana Madison.
Thank you. Next, we have Dolores de Vera.
Hello. As a public school teacher, I believe in restorative justice. But I also have to admit that I have experienced at times how difficult it can be to get it to work. In middle schools, when kids are being disruptive, we have been told, trained, to give kids a think sheet, a reflection sheet. It has questions on it that they're supposed to sit down and fill out in writing. Those questions might be, what did you do? Why did you do it? How do you think your actions affected other people? How can you do things differently in the future? Can you do anything to make it better? Is there something else you want to be sure that the teacher understands? What I found teaching middle school is that the first time you hand a student that sheet, it often just does not work the way you'd hope, the way you hoped. But sometimes it works the second time or the third time. So board members, at a previous meeting, I came here to talk to you about a court case that ruled TUSD used an incorrect legal theory when it took away the earned paid sick days of substitute teachers. I hope that you've had some time to think about who was impacted and what could be done to correct the mistake so that all subs who had their earnings taken, what can be done to correct it for all subs who had their earnings taken away? Maybe you think that since the earnings were taken away so long ago, it doesn't matter. I know a lot of board members take the position that they want to have a hands-off approach and let administration handle it, you know, because they don't want to get involved. There are a lot of rationalizations. Any teacher who's tried to implement restorative justice knows that. But I'm going to ask you again what the right thing to do is, not just for the subs who had their earned sick days unfairly taken away, but for the reputation of TUSD, which we hope wants to be known as a good and fair employer. And what's the right thing to do for the community that overwhelmingly voted for Prop 206 to give marginalized workers the ability to earn a few paid sick days? I know what I think you should do, but I'd really like to know what board members think, and Dr. Trujillo and Mr. Ross think. Thank you, Governing Board.
Thank you. And before I forget, we do have an interpreter this evening, so I'm sorry. I saw you earlier, so if you do need her services, please let her know. Okay, next we've got Jern Blandinson.
Gern, actually, that's fine. Good to see you all again. Hope everybody's doing well. I really just have a request. Again, not really familiar with how all this stuff works. Don't really know all the protocols and, you know, the Roberts rules and whatever. But bottom line is, and maybe I've missed, maybe you've already done this and I just missed it because, you know, I got other stuff going on too, like everybody. But if this hasn't happened, I'd sure like to have it happen. At least put the request out. So I'm one of those people that keep harping on the whole mask thing. I know we're still kind of kicking that thing around. But just want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So my thinking is that, you know, I see a lot of talk about marginalized groups and such in the district and other places, and it seems like there's a lot of attention and resources given towards different groups. I think there's a fair number of parents that aren't necessarily happy with how things went during the whole COVID thing, and certainly don't want to see that happen again. So my thinking is that maybe at some point we could all kind of have a little powwow, a little bit of a focus group or whatever you call it. And because here's the thing, you guys, I still come back to this thing. I look in, I'm not an attorney, I'm not even that smart, but I go look in the ARS, the Arizona Revised Statutes, Title 15. I haven't read the whole thing, it's kind of boring, but I've read a lot of it. And I haven't seen anything in there that really says that I gave my power as a parent to you, for you to make medical decisions for my kids. So I know there's a lot of parents that feel that way, and there's probably more that don't even care, but there's enough of us that feel that way. I think that it's worth a conversation. In what I did find, oddly enough, in Title I was that whole parental rights thing where it actually specifically says the liberty, and I'm quoting, the liberty of parents to direct the upbringing, education, healthcare, and mental health of their children is a fundamental right. And it goes on to say that, nobody's supposed to be able to take that away from me as a parent. And I imagine that you got some kind of a loophole, you must, a legal loophole. Certainly you don't have a moral one, but I would assume you have a legal loophole. I'd love to know it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong about a lot of things. Just ask my ex-wife. She'll tell you I'm wrong about a lot of stuff. But I don't see it. I would really, I don't know. We got elections coming up. Maybe it might be helpful to smooth things out with the community. Just help them to understand where your position is, what your legal position is in this whole thing. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Art Lopez is our next speaker. Mr. Lopez? Okay, we're moving on to Melissa Conroy.
There are so many pressing issues to talk to you people about today. It's frustrating you only allow 3 minutes. From the exploitation and grooming of our children to the pornography the teachers are assigning them to read, to the safety and security issues. But I find myself in the tyrannical overreach of the CDC yet again. Last Tuesday, August 16th, the Biden White House COVID response coordinator effectively admitted the 6 feet of social distancing thing was entirely made up. From the beginning, there's been ample scientific literature to demonstrate that most of what the CDC was saying was a lie. The CDC pushed all these different rules on we the people without science backing it up, but they were telling us to trust the science. Now they're telling us they made it up. So where is the science? There wasn't any. A good example was when they changed the social distancing from 6 feet to 3 feet in schools in March of 2021, with face coverings still mandatory. The change came after a massive amount of pushback from parents and teachers. Of course, the CDC does not have the authority to mandate anything, and for good reason. It's either almost always wrong or completely political in its decision-making. According to a study by the American Council on Science and Health, found that schools that implemented the guidance of the CDC for the 6 feet apart or more had more cases than the 3 feet. Just like the pointless and damaging school mask mandates, the experts gave the nation guidance based on no real-world scientific data. But we already had the data, the peer-reviewed documentation. And what did the CDC do during this time? They censored the true scientists. Now the CDC director is saying we need to overhaul and that they're omitting their flawed COVID response. Walensky and Fauci were feeding the public bad information, and yet you still have your policies for our kids according to this corruption. The vaccination doesn't stop the virus. In fact, it makes it worse. A new Icelandic study shows COVID reinfection rate rises with the number of vaccine doses. The study showed that for most age groups, those who receive 2 doses or more are more likely to become reinfected than those who received no vaccination or just 1 dose. If what you and the CDC are pushing is actually true, shouldn't all the unvaccinated, and there are a lot of us, be dead by now? Since we aren't, the CDC must be lying about that too. The ones with the jab are the ones that are having the problems. I could go into detail about all the vaccine injuries, but I would be wasting my breath. The CDC has lost all trust and needs to be shut down. Stop listening to them. Nuremberg 2.0 is coming.
Thank you. Okay, next is Stephanie Kirk.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Kirk. Have you all noticed that Big Pharma government encouraged the LGBT plus to come out, but now points out how a subgroup of this community is responsible for the largest portion of the transmission and spread of monkeypox? I wonder how this is going to play out in TUSD schools with the past unregulated bullying on campus. Since TUSD's last drag show went so well in the eyes of the board, even though it was organized by an adult TUSD school counselor employer who touches children, you have put together a drag show bingo event to further manipulate and exploit our children. When I think of drag shows, I picture adult nightclubs, alcohol, excessive skin showing, grabbing, bottom spanking, and dollars flying. Apparently, the more child-appropriate titles were taken. Have you investigated how microplastics or herbicides injections interfere with our endocrine system? What about the side effects of gender-affirming surgery, hormones, masks, or the experimental jabs? You continue to smother our children with questionable literature and masks that further divide by supporting colorful language like F the police when you can be buying more copies of George Orwell's Animal Farm in 1984. You know, Orwell once was quoted with, "The people will believe what the media tells them to believe." Recently, Nancy Pelosi, when she wasn't drunk, stated that our big pharma paid news that China is one of the freest societies in the world, but those who are worldly aware know that this is not true. We also know the experimental injections in the masks that you push onto our children in exchange for ESSER 1, 2, and 3 funds is an embarrassing and child abuse. TUSD is now getting $172.9 million to continue to big pharma indoctrinate our children on top of the $94.8 million you've already received. What are the ESSER 3 requirements to obtain the grant other than to indoctrinate our children into believing that they need to do experimental drugs, breathe second-class air while accepting your new definition on campus regarding drag shows? One requirement is to provide public input during meetings, but already Adelita abruptly shut down the call to the public last week online, crying time restraints. Many parents took time out of their day to listen or participate, and you shut down the ESSER 3 and you shut this down, the ESSER 3 requirement. Not that it hasn't been done in the past. The board has zero authority to tell me and others what to do and what is safe and healthy. Do I get up here and tell you all to eat better or to lose weight? No, I don't, because I'm not your keeper. And 21 U.S. Code Emergency Authorization 360-BBB3 states that you cannot push experimental medications, procedures onto the public because it's against the law. Imagine if the requirement in the future mirrored something like Harvey Weinstein constructed illegally onto the actors of Hollywood. Where do we draw the line with bullying when our school district pushes big pharma drugs for attendance like Harvey Weinstein pushed blowjobs for hiring? Now, we got
Ms.
50...
Kirk, you're done.
You know what?
Thank
Listen
you.
to me, Mrs. Rose. If you can put this crap in our children's book, then you can sit here and you can listen to me say it.
Your time is up, ma'am.
50,000 is going in for sick leave. If the boosters worked, then why
Ma'am, you will
are
be
you
escorted out by
continuously giving
security
money?
if you do
Don't
not
you put
come.
your hands on me, because I'll put my hands on you. You're all done. Thank you.
All right. Board members? Ma'am, we are done and we are moving on.
You are disrupting a public meeting, and you can be removed for that.
We have hit our 20-minute mark. We just have a few more speakers, but I wanted to ask the board what they would prefer to do.
I would like to extend the call to the audience.
Okay. We only have 4 more speakers.
Okay, I'll go ahead and second Ms. Shaw's motion unless we can just go ahead and move on.
Are you okay? Okay. So we will extend the call to the audience to finish our last speakers. So next is Virginia Bichet.
I was referred to as sad and pathetic not long ago while in this boardroom. Do you know what is sad and pathetic? Your actions and behaviors on August 16th were sad and pathetic. The meeting you held on August 16th, you specifically asked parents to email their concerns to you. You did not read a single email. Do you know what else is sad and pathetic? You decided not to read them because you all had other places to be. I don't really care where you need to be. You ran for the school board. You were elected as a school board member. You need to be there when the duty calls. If you cannot fulfill the duties, perhaps you should resign. The public deserve to hear those concerns. You did not take any parents' concerns into account before making your decisions. That bold move told us a lot. It reminded me of the August 2021 meeting when you did the same thing. We are over your COVID nonsense. With all the news of your COVID agenda crumbling, I cannot believe you are still trying to push this on our kids, my kids. The CDC, you know the agency you guys said you're always following, is done with this narrative as well. Dr. Deborah Birx admitted the government is lying to us. Dr. Fauci has been caught lying numerous times and has lied to us for years, actually. I found some interesting information regarding COVID shots, COVID protocols, regarding our local Pima County Health Department and schools. When you call the health department to ask if and or how they track COVID shots, COVID protocols, they transfer you to the schools team. Per the schools team, the health department does not have a percentage report of anything from the schools. The schools are not reporting anything. They are not required to at this time because the schools are doing everything the health department has asked of them. The health department only has a percentage from their own vaccine clinics they have at the schools, and it goes by month. It's not broken down by district or school. This is straight from the horse's mouth, the health department. One of the leaders in the health department went to work ill with COVID and played it off like they had allergies. Why on earth are we taking advice from a person like this that can't even tell when they are sick, and they're telling us to follow certain protocols? Why is our local health department still spewing this information, and why are you guys following it? TUSD was recently on social media again regarding another drag performance. Drag bingo. I don't know if you guys endorsed it, but your logo's right next to it. It's floating around. This drag bingo was sold tickets for. It was to fund abortions. So do you guys want kids or do you want to kill kids? Because you're in the business of teaching kids. So you guys need to make up your mind. Another thing, my friend was asked.
Ma'am, your time has expired. Thank you. Okay, next, Lisette Lazo Arbalo.
Hi, good evening. I'm here to talk about some intergovernmental agreements between the Health Department and TUSD. I found one here that the TUSD signed with the Health Department on 12/7 of 21. And then there's another one I found here that was on a Board of Supervisors thing I found. It was in page 75 of 96, so I really had to dig for this. But the one TUSD signed on 12/7 of 21, it says this agreement with the county for the provision and an administration of childhood and immunizations and other health services from January 1st to December 31st, 2026. So that means you guys are going to be offering immunizations on campus through the health department, according to what I read here. But one area of concern not just the vaccines, was on Article 6, letter H. It says, provide public health nursing staff who conduct community and population-based services, case management, home visitation, and immunization services at district sites. Number 3, it says community assessment activities. To me, that's also known as surveys in conjunction with TUSD staff and or students. Services may include healthy living, tobacco, oral health, women's, infant, and children, WIC, health education services, and reproductive health education services. There's a big list. But anyways, the one I found from Board of Supervisors, the health department is, the subject title for this is Exempting Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Survey from Parental Consent. So does that mean the health department's gonna come into the schools, offer these surveys to students without parental consent? Is that what's going on here? Plus these surveys right here, it says, these surveys are known as YRBBS. The surveys monitors the following: behaviors that contribute to injuries or violence, sexual behaviors, sexually transmitted diseases, unintended pregnancy, alcohol, tobacco, and drug use, unhealthy dietary behaviors, and inadequate physical activity. I'm sorry, but schools are learning facilities, not hospitals and clinics. This is just overreach of power, and for the health department to even suggest parental consent, like removing parental consent, absolutely ridiculous. Anyways, just so you know, also parents, you might want to check out courageisahabit.org. I found some interesting information. Let me see, sorry. This is, okay. Medical and counseling records indicate.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, your time is up.
Your children are not protected by HIPAA. Check it out.
Okay, next is Guadalupe Hedinger.
Good evening. My name is Guadalupe Henninger. I would like to start by saying no matter how great our state superintendent is, our Pima County superintendent is, our TUSD superintendent and governing board are, as long as the governor and the U.S. state legislation continue to be a roadblock to progress, it will be hard to accomplish the things our students need. On these midterm elections, we need to elect those who are of good moral character and understand and support the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America. Those who launder lies about stolen elections and don't know how government works and don't abide by the oath they took to defend the Constitution shouldn't be elected. The latest court rulings have created a lot of emotional distress in our students and everybody else. The courts are supposed to make sure that laws are consistent with the Constitution. If it takes away people's constitutional rights, the courts need to reject it. Our country is a government of laws, not men. Leaders, government, and groups must obey the law and follow the law, and no one is above the law. Vetting is a constitutional requirement when appointed. Judges need to be fair-minded and abide by the Constitution. Guadalupe Henninger.
Thank you. And last speaker this evening is Pilar Ruiz.
Good evening. My name is Pilar, and I want to start by saying I usually come up here when I don't like when people either break the rules, break the law, or break codes of conduct, ethical codes of conduct. So I'm going to start by, I want to remind you all that even though you wear many hats, such as a parent, a political party member, a board member, a vocational hat, your job here is solely that of a board member who serves all children, not just your children, and I don't think it's appropriate to rah-rah for your school. There are many schools in this district with a lot of children that you serve, and if you're going to rah-rah for one school, you need to rah-rah for all of them. I find that really offensive. I'd also like to talk about accountability, and I was a little hesitant to do this, but I talked about this last time. I think it's a little disrespectful to not look at the people who are speaking to you, Ms. Rose. And one of the reasons that you shouldn't get rid of the call to the audience is because otherwise you're not going to get to hear the things that are happening in the TUSD. The public isn't going to get to know. And I think it was wonderful that many kids graduated last semester. However, some of them did not get that, weren't that fortunate. However, your niece was able to graduate because you interceded on her behalf, and that was incredibly inappropriate and an abuse of your position, and that stuff needs to be called out. It shouldn't be happening. You have conflict of interest there, and you need to keep that line. You need to keep that line. We don't need to hear about the PTA Rincon. I'm sorry, I love PTA, but every school needs PTA members, and you shouldn't be interceding as a board member in student population things. As I said, I would urge you to not vote this new call to the audience thing in. I ask you each to remember why you were elected. You were elected to represent TUSD students, all stakeholders. And if you can practice civility, you can speak to each other whether you agree or not. And you need to allow people to speak. I know it's a hot seat up there, and you don't want to get called out, and you don't want to get yelled at, and you don't want to hear people, but you know what? You got to do it. That's what you were voted in to do. So I really hope you don't do that. And, you know, as far as this stuff about LGBTQ, I am a mother of a transgender child, but I think that you guys missed the point. We don't need counselors of any sexual orientation shacking up with our kids. And people need to be able to say that without conflict happening here. We need to be mature adults and be able to have conversations. And the Gibson report, please look at the Gibson report from 2014. None of you saw it maybe, but Adelita Grijalva saw it. 8 years ago, we did an audit on the HR. Same nonsense is still happening. So check it out. It's good information. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Dr. Trujillo, any comment?
Thank you, Clerk Luna Rose. Only response I have is with regard to the potential payroll issue that was brought to our attention by one of the speakers. Our finance department will be working with each individual employee that qualifies for that sick time.
Okay, thank you. Any board members would like to address any of the comments? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. I first want to thank Ms. Earl for coming in and advocating again for her daughter. And I apologize for the treatment you received and the slow response time. And I'm going to ask staff once again to please review this matter and see if we could get the hub station for Dodge, I believe, improved. Also, if we can look into, or if Dr. Trujillo, if you could just maybe field Mr. Delgado's questions about where to find the funding. He's still in the building, so if you want to just let him know about that. But it is on our website somewhere. I'm not good at navigating our website either, but we'll get that information to you, Mr. Delgado. Also, I think that's it. Thank you, everyone, for speaking to us tonight.
Okay. Any other board members? I would like to address Ms. Ruiz's comments concerning accountability. Two things. Number one, I support all the schools. It just happened to do a board report about, and we do it every other meeting, it's special board meeting, and it just happened to coincide with the time that the only campus I've had time to, because I do work full time, is Rincon. But I do support all the schools. I have been to a lot of our campuses. We have a huge district, and all of us, my colleagues included, know that it's a very busy time. So, and I support PTA for all the schools. So if your site council or your PTA at your child's school needs your help, please join. They are always asking. I speak from experience. And lastly, to Ms. Ruiz's point concerning my niece, that is a private matter. I did not interfere. I am and have always been a emergency contact for her, and whatever would happen to her during her time here in TUSD, I just got called to come pick her up. I did not interfere, and if you have any more concerns about that, you can talk to Mr. Ross or Dr. Trujillo, and I don't appreciate you putting my family on point. You want to come at me? That's fine. This is what I signed up for, but none of my family did. So I don't appreciate it, and I appreciate your time, and now we will move on.
If I can just say one more thing, Ms. Luna Rose.
Yes, please.
Just so I can stop getting emails about it, that allegation is under investigation, Ms. Ruiz, and so just so the public is aware.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you have legal address that since it was called out publicly? That's just not okay. There is no allegation, or it's already been addressed. If you're comfortable with it, if Mr. Ross can say it since it's already been said publicly, I think that, you know, you need the support from our legal team that has already looked into the issue.
Yes, please, Mr. Ross or Mr. Trujillo.
President Grijalva, Board Clerk Luna Rose. First of all, the allegation did surface anonymously with absolutely no name or justification. I can communicate only as a response to the call to the audience that we can confirm that there was absolutely no unprofessional, unethical conduct engaged in by Board Clerk Luna Rose. She is a documented emergency contact that was called to the school for the purposes of picking up her niece. She had absolutely no contact with the suspending administrator. This was verified, and there was absolutely no contact or communication with the disciplinary hearing officer. That has been verified, and those two individuals did come on the record and verify that as part of our inquiry.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now we are moving on to, I believe we're going back to 3.1, awards and recognitions.
All right, President Grijalva, members of the governing board, we have a brief recognition agenda item here this evening, and I will ask Jean to cue us up. Always an honor to celebrate the excellence of our staff. Our first recognition tonight, Gertrude Villa, our community representative at Tully. This is a staff member that we are honoring tonight for her integrity, her honesty, and by exhibiting the values and the virtues that we hold most dear here in TUSD. In the spirit of helping somebody in a difficult spot that lost their Costco card and credit card, Gertrude Villa, community representative at Tully, saw it in the parking lot, picked them up. Following day, she sent our community member, Ms. Havens, a message, which she did not immediately see. And Ms. Villa proceeded to keep the cards safe in her possession for 25 days, almost a month. So when Ms. Havens turned in her iPad on July 25th to get it serviced for the summer, she was contacted and the cards were returned to her. Ms. Villa is truly the definition of a good Samaritan and a person of integrity, and of course embodies the spirit and the value of the leadership that we love to see in all of our TUSD employees. So I want to publicly thank Gertrude Villa for her service, her honesty, and for helping her fellow colleague in a difficult situation. Our next recognition goes to one of our most renowned coaching staffs that we have here in the district, multiple state championship winning Sabino High School softball coaching staff. They have been recognized by the National Fast Pitch Coaches Association. They've been named the coaching staff of the year for the region. Led by head coach Cindy Cubillas and staff Ina Madrid, Jackie Orquijo, Mark Nielsen, Alyssa Miles, and Kaylee Flint. They were all recognized based on the following criteria. These coaches steered Sabino to its third straight AIA 3A state championship for softball. They posted a 32-3 record and owned a 27-game winning streak in 2022, as well as captured the AIA Outstanding Sportsmanship Award. Finally, the team posted 3 shutouts and outscored the opposition 44-7 during a 4-0 playoff run to the state title. The Sabino High School coaching staff was selected by peers associated with National Fast Pitch Coaches Association for this recognition. Congratulations, Coach Cubillas and the staff, and it's wonderful recognition. And I will note that the Sabino High School softball team has quietly put together one of the most dominant and impressive dynasties in all of AIA sports. That's on both the boys and girls side of the house in all conferences. You will not find a major program three-peating like this with the state championship. So congratulations to the SaberCats and this amazing team of coaches that have put in so much time, energy, spirit, and passion to the success of our student athletes. Our next and last recognition, we would love to take a moment and recognize Tully and the work that they've done with the Starbucks WMTN Black Partner Network, which was established in 2007 to share, promote, and celebrate African American heritage, to develop partners and advise business and enrich Starbucks' contribution to customers and community. This year, they chose Tully Elementary Magnet School for their all-in event Back to School Drive to further educate students in environmental education with a garden and ecology focus. Every Starbucks in Tucson has a donation box for Tully that are available until August 31st, including many of the Starbucks located inside stores. On September 1st, the Starbucks WMTN Black Partner Network will be delivering the items to the school, and we will do a celebration event on September 17th to recognize this wonderful event. Thank you, Starbucks, WMTN Black Partner Network, for choosing Tully and supporting our students. President Grijalva, this concludes the report, superintendent's report, or I'm sorry, the awards and recognition for this evening.
President Grijalva, Ms. Luna Rose left, and can I ask for a 5-minute recess?
I don't think she's here.
I would support that.
There's no objection. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we can get back. Thank you for allowing a quick break. Okay, so I do believe we are at consent agenda. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, Clerk Luna Rose, I would like to formally present the consent agenda as arranged for governing board consideration, items 6.2 through 6.8.
Okay.
Ms. Luna Rose, I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Ms. Grijalva with the item, second by Dr. Shaw. From 6.2 to 6.8. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, item passes. And now we are at action items. 7.1, review and approve the memorandum of agreement, 2223 TEA consensus agreement for changes for counselors coverage, elementary combination classes with authorization for the Director of Employee Relations to execute the agreement. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, Board Clerk Luna Rose, members of the governing board, I'm really excited about this. These are just two items that we probably should have addressed a long time ago, and we're proud to bring them forward now. We realize that vacancy coverage has been a tremendous challenge for our counselors around the district. We still continue to be down over 20. We realize that caseloads have swelled in many situations to single counselors handling 700-800 students on their caseload. And prior to tonight, we've never had a mechanism to compensate them like we do for the teachers when teachers take on extra sessions or sub-coverage. Well, tonight's proposal will seek to remedy that, and we're very excited to bring that forward. And going right along with that, for many years we've been in situations enrollment-wise where we've had to what's called run combo classes. When in one grade level we don't have enough students in the classroom to make a full classroom, and we combine that grade level with another grade level. Like when you have a low enrolled first grade classroom and you have to move it into a second grade classroom that has room, now you're asking the teacher to teach part second grade and part first grade. This is also an assignment for many, many years that has warranted additional compensation for the extra work and planning and differentiated instruction. So we're proud tonight to bring proposals to address both challenges in the district tonight for your consideration. I want to thank our Director for Employee Relations, Maricela Mesa, and our TEA President, Margaret Cheney, for their work on these two long-standing challenges and finally arriving at proposals. Ms. Mesa.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. Yes, exactly what Dr. Trujillo stated. We're asking for approval of this MOA. I would add that this is a one-year agreement, so we would see how everything went this year and then look at permanent language moving forward that would be voted on by the members. But we are very much in agreement that something needs to be done, and we're hopeful this is a start.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes.
I have a question. So this is retro to the date, or like if it's the first day of school when the issue became a problem, right?
It would be for the start of the school year.
Right, okay. I would like to move the item.
I'll second. All right, I've got move the item by Ms. Grijalva, second by Ms. Counts. Board members, any questions? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, item passes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Mesa. All right, now we are into 7.2, approve a 60-day extension of meet and confer agreement with Eli administrators, psychologists, and research project managers agreement through October 31st, 2022, with authorization for the Director of Employee Relations to execute the agreement.
Yes, Board Clerk Luna Rose, I'll ask Maricela Mesa if we can come on back for the Eli extension. And let's give a little information of why the 60-day extension is needed.
Thank you. When we had ended in June, we were still working out through some of the questions about the salary schedules. Then their board, essentially their terms ended at the end of June. So they have a new board right now, And they do need some time with the start of school. Everything was very busy, and they do need to have some time to dive into what the changes were before fully agreeing to it and having comfort in it. So that's why we're asking for the extension, please.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move that on, Ms. Luna Rose.
All right.
I'll second.
All right, moved by Dr. Ravi, second by Ms. Counts. Board members, any questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, item passes unanimously. Thank you again, Ms. Mesa.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're at 7.3, consideration of performance impact analysis, flexible assignments for certified DAPE staff. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, Board Clerk Luna Rose, members of the governing board. Tonight, this is the first of two items that will be our inaugural first-time run at the performance impact analysis process that will become the realization of our post-unitary status commitment that we made to the court and the community. Anytime that there is a major change, we are responsible for conducting a comprehensive performance impact analysis to examine any potential effects on academic achievement for plaintiff class subgroups, also any effects to immigration. And tonight is our first run at it by order of the court and by our commitment to the court as we've been granted unitary status. We're here tonight to ask the governing board to consider the first of two adjustments. The first will be for flexible teaching assignments for DAPE teaching staff. What we know is DAPE was established in 2015-2016. It is a voluntary program designed to give families an opportunity to remain connected to classroom instruction in a smaller environment. It is also designed to reduce the overall amount of long-term suspension days off campus and away from instruction. It's an opportunity for students to continue on with teacher-assigned work. And this is very important, especially at the high school level where each student has 5 teachers of record. It also employs the guided practice teaching model. This is where our DAPE teachers, they are the lead instructors in the room, but they're walking around assisting, reteaching, tutoring, providing small group instruction as needed to the work that has been assigned by the homeroom teachers. And then it also features a behavioral support component that is around 45 minutes daily that our students do receive. We have been, as a result of the court order, we are responsible for ensuring that DAPE staffing levels match the staffing levels that were featured by the program in our last pre-pandemic year, which was 18-19, and the new establishment of a 1-to-10 teacher ratio assigned by the court. And so what we're recommending tonight, obviously, is total alignment and compliance with what the court has ordered for us to staff DAPE at the ratio of 1-to-10. Second, that we direct at least one certificated DAPE staff member to facilitate orientation meetings, informational sessions to parents, follow up with parents after long-term suspension hearings, to try to schedule intake meetings so that more information about DAPE can get directly to the families by a DAPE department member. Though our hearing officers have a script and though our hearing officers have very general information about DAPE, the goal here is to have an actual DAPE department member who has more intimate knowledge of the tools and resources available in DAPE to be able to handle the follow-up with parents and the orientation sessions. We want to be able to assign that as a duty. And then any certificated staff member not currently assigned to a DAPE classroom or DAPE duties, being able to assign them to duties outside of the DAPE program. Obviously, as the needs of DAPE increase and we get an increase in DAPE enrollment, such staff members would be recalled immediately. If we had a fresh set of 10 students and we needed to assign that 1-to-10 ratio, we understand that any type of a placement would have to be subject to immediate recall. And so why would we be so interested in the flexible teaching assignments? Well, what we see right now is when we have an allocation of 10 teachers, which we've been ordered to have by the court, Historically, DAPE enrollment has not exceeded more than 40 students at any given time throughout the year. You can see this in the appendices that have been attached to the PIA from the Assessment and Evaluations Comprehensive Report on DAPE performance and DAPE functionality and effectiveness for the years 15-16 all the way through 18-19. And right now, we have an allocation of 10 teachers assigned full-time to the program. 5 vacancies, 5 that are fully with us right now. Well, we've got a little bit of some undercapacity going on. And these flexible assignments can help maximize resources and meet the crucial needs in and out of the department. I don't think anybody here is under any illusion that what that major flexible duty is going to be. It's going to be coverage. With our teacher vacancy issues across the district, I just don't want to waste any time dancing around what that primary alternative assignment would be until we can bring them back in for DAPE programming. And currently, right now, we've only had 9 students since the start of school attend DAPE. We have 8 invitations out there right now for families, inviting them to participate in DAPE. We don't have any responses yet, but we've only had 9 students in the program. And with 5 teachers on staff and still hiring for 5, if we had all 10, that would be a class size of less than 1 per teacher. And so there's some overcapacity there going on that we would like to have some flexibility in addressing. When you take a look at our staffing picture, just to give you a little bit of the financials and what's been allotted to date, we have 10 classroom teachers that have been allotted. It's a total cost of just over $500,000. We have 5 with us, and we're interviewing for 5. We have 5 vacant positions. There's a 1.0 ex-ed teacher specifically for the department, and that's a cost of $48,000. We also have a restorative practices facilitator assigned to the program at just under $56,000. We have 4 behavior intervention monitors at $171,000. We have a 0.5 program coordinator, $30,000, and then we have a 1.0 social worker. That's a vacancy at about $55,000. There's a total cost of just under $900,000 to staff DAPE from end to end. I also want to note that we do have some vacancies with behavior intervention monitors. I do believe we have 3. We have 3. Okay, so I didn't note that there in the parentheses, but you have 3 that are vacant as well. So as you can see, we also know that when you look at DAPE enrollment trends, DAPE historically is light with enrollment in the fall. And our report, the analysis report that's in the appendices will note that typically as the year progresses, we will get more DAPE placements. Those tend to happen more in the spring. So when we went in and we did the performance impact analysis in the areas of the unitary status plan that we're responsible for analyzing for any effects to integration, non-compliance, or contributing to either behavior or academic gaps, the first thing we looked at was existing USP requirements and court orders. Because we are staffing at 1 to 10, because we've returned our staffing levels to the way that we were directed to return them, we're in full compliance, because that's what the court asked us to do with these existing court orders. There is no impact to the student assignment portion of the USP. We're not changing any boundaries. We're not changing anything having to do with magnet programs. We're not changing any magnet protocols, any lottery protocols. There's no changes to the court-ordered student achievement action plans. When we looked at transportation, it's important to note that when students are suspended, that suspension does carry over to the bus. So DAPE students have never been assigned district transportation. They've always been given SunTrans because that suspension does carry over to the bus, unless it's very specific to an IEP that mandates district transportation because of a transportation provision inside of an IEP. So in that sense, there really is no impact to transportation. There's no impact to administrative or certificated staffing levels. We were given an order by the court to staff DAPE exactly in the way that you saw here. This is coming from the court. This is what we've budgeted for. This is what we're staffing. So there's no impact to either administrative or certificated staffing level. And then there's no impact to the entirety of Section 5, which is USP quality of education. That looks at ELD, that looks at GATE, that looks like exceptional education, that looks at all of our subgroup programming under quality of education. When we looked at the impact on discipline itself, DAPE itself is a disciplinary initiative born of the USP to try to reduce the amount of long-term suspension days in this district for at-risk kids, kids of color, and also to take a more restorative approach to dealing with long-term suspended students. The programmatic model that's in DAPE that I talked about is not going to be changed. We're talking about these assignments when we have an overage of the ratio of 1 to 10, meaning more teachers in the department than we actually have students. And then we just have teachers that are available to carry out duties in support of other areas of need in the district. We didn't find any impact on compliance with USP requirements for family and community engagement centers. These are two departments that have separate budgets inside of our desegregation budget. We have the Family and Community Resource Centers under Family and Community Engagement. It's separate departments, separate budgets, separate supplies, separate staffing costs. And then we have DAPE. And DAPE has its own budget. It has its own supply budget. It's got its own staffing. We're not going to be mixing in terms of budget-wise or any resources there. And then looking at impact to the district's programs, we didn't find any impact to any existing commitments that we have in the areas of facilities and technology. So our request tonight is very simple. We have 8 students that have participated in DAPE so far this year. 9 students. We have 8 invitations out there. We haven't heard back from the families yet, and they could. But assuming even the 8 pending invitations come in, we have capacity for 50 students right now in DAPE because we have 5 vacancies, but we have 5 teachers on staff. And even with our 5 teachers on staff, we have capacity for 50, and we've only been able to serve 8. We know that there's a lot of need in the district right now for coverage, especially with XED. We can probably use a 1.0 XED assistance in a variety of ways around the district. Our sub situation, we're going to talk about that a little bit later tonight, is very, very dire, with so many schools that have fill rates that are beneath 60%, some of them in the 30s. All we want is we want to be able to have the flexibility to meet the needs of the DAPE program with regard to orientations, information sessions, and follow-up. Make sure we have a lead staff member that's able to invite parents in, orientate them, give them information in the program, and then also the flexibility when we do find ourselves with additional capacity above and beyond what the directed ratio is to be able to meet the needs in other areas of the district, and then, of course, memorialize our obligation to recall. If we have a DAPE teacher serving in another department in another capacity, albeit TUVA or any other classroom, temporary classroom assignment where we need coverage, we want to make the public commitment that they're coming back as quickly as possible if we see more DAPE placements. So that's our request this evening with regard to this PIA. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Governing Board for questions.
Thank you.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So in regards to the DAPE teachers, when they're assigned to other locations, you mentioned that they would be coming back. This is something that we do when we're in need in other departments. I know that we had, aside from the whole group of TUSD employees that went out to help on the first or second day, I know we had curriculum development specialists that have been covering classes, principals have been covering classes, and so I don't think that this is out of line at all. I guess, is the next item when you're going to be discussing location?
The next item will be when we're discussing location. Yeah.
Okay, so for this item, I'll go ahead and move the item.
I'll second. Okay. Any more discussion? Dr. Shaw.
Thank you, Ms. Luna Rose. I have some questions. How long are students typically enrolled in DAPE when they enter DAPE?
So with that, I'm going to turn it over. We have assisting me here this evening for more detailed information about DAPE placements and length. I've got our Director for Alternative Ed, Yolanda Nunez, and then, of course, our Assistant Superintendent for EDI, Kanasha Brown. And for any questions on that very, very detailed report on a DAPE program effectiveness that is not only a part of this item, but the next one, its author is here, Dr. Hallie Freitas from Assessment and Evaluation. So I'll turn it over to Yolanda.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo, members of the board, President Grijalva. Students are assigned to DAPE if they have a 20-day or more suspension, and we usually have students anywhere from 25 days to 40 days.
And then are they, when they are in there for 25 to 40 days, do there's a special DAPE curriculum that are following, or are they just doing their home school's curriculum and just getting support to do like whatever classes they were enrolled in at their home school?
Yes, they follow the TUSD curriculum and they get their assignments from their home school, from their teachers, and then DAPE teachers do support and facilitate that learning.
And I'm assuming for the DAPE teachers that we do have, and we have 10 positions, are they specialized, like this is an English language DAPE position, this is a math language DAPE position, DAPE position, a science DAPE teacher? Are they specialized in the different subject areas for all of the 10 DAPE positions that we have?
Yes, so our teachers are certified 612 or K8, depending on which area they're serving. And we have a few teachers who are highly qualified in both English and language arts. We have some who are highly qualified in social studies, some in math. So we do have a range of certifications.
And so logistically, to follow up on that, like what is the plan then on if we went on to one teacher for the 8 students or just a few handful of teachers to be able to teach the full range of subjects for the students so that they're getting the English language education, the math, the science, the social studies, and the whatever broad range of subjects they're taking in their home schools to be able to return to school and not falling behind. So what is the logistical plan to make sure that there's qualified instruction if we went down from the 10 teachers down to just a small number of teachers, 1 or 2 or 3, with the small enrollment that we have, so those students that are there are still getting the range of educational needs met in the time
So
that they're
our
there.
teachers do collaborate, and there are often times when students either email their homeschool teachers, or they also get support from the other teachers as well. So there's constant communication throughout the group.
Real quick, Dr. Trujillo, we lost Ms. Grijalva.
Okay.
Lightning hit close to her and she lost internet.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
I'm going to try to call her and get her.
I want to extend upon the answer to provide a little bit more information, Dr. Shaw. It's a guided teaching model, so the staffing is 1 to 10. So what you have in a sense is inside of DAPE, you have a general practitioner certified teacher who's responsible for providing assistance to each and every kid in the class with their homeschool assigned work. It may be math, it may be science, it may be social studies. That DAPE teacher maintains a chain of communication with the homeschool teachers to ask for assistance, additional resources, to try to help explain the content material. So it's not the model is not where the students get a set period of content. Math, 50 minutes, and then language arts math. So it's truly a guided teaching model where it's just that one practitioner in the room.
Okay, that really helps. Thank you. Thank you, Londa.
Okay. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. I'm glad you asked about that, Dr. Shaw, because I am also concerned about students in DAPE not getting a range of their educational needs met. And I think that's pretty obvious when you consider that there's only 5 DAPE teachers working at this point. And so if you go to any DAPE site, which I hope you all have visited at least once in the last year, there's 1 teacher there. And for all the sites I've visited, whether there's, a couple students or like a handful or 7 or 9, it's a lot to balance because these are students from different schools, from different grades, studying all kinds of different material. And so you're not always going to have a math certified DAPE teacher there. You're not always going to have a, English certified DAPE teacher. And that's just the reality of the situation. I would like to see if, Jean, could you bring up page 16 of the performance impact analysis on this item? And while you're doing that, I do have a question. Dr. Trujillo, in the budget that we're looking at now, you mentioned this is funded through DSEG, right? Okay, so is it legal for us to float DSEG-funded DAPE teachers to substitute elsewhere that doesn't have anything to do with DSEG?
You can use DSEG-funded positions in support of DSEG qualifying expenditures, categories, and activities. So as long as the particular activity qualifies for being funded from 910G funds, we're okay.
But do you actually think that's going to happen? Because it seems like what you just said, that we're just going to float them as substitutes wherever they're needed.
I wouldn't use the word float, okay? I think we're going to meet the needs of the district. I think it's going to be it would be difficult to make the case that TUSD was wrongfully spending desegregation dollars by putting a highly qualified teacher in a predominantly African and American and Latino math classroom that has no teacher of record. I think that's going to be a difficult case to make, and that tends to be where a lot of our vacancies are right now, in terms of when we get out and we look at where the teacher vacancy issue is most pronounced. It's the same thing with exceptional education. I think it's going to be a difficult case to make.
Well, I'm not sure if any math class should be ethnically identifiable. According to the USP, classes should be integrated at this point. I'm concerned that we're, running into muddy water in regards to that funding. But could you zoom in, please, Jean, on the staffing and locations of the program section of this document, please? Okay, so I'm just going to just scroll down a little bit. Thank you. Read a quote from this about staffing in DAPE. The lack of certified teachers has also affected DAPE, and to compensate for the lack of certified teachers, support staff who normally offered wraparound services served as substitute teachers in these positions. The lack of certified teachers not only affected the ability to provide academically rigorous and aligned material to students, but may have also had the unintended effect of consigning the wraparound support services to a lesser function. And so this information that we wrote in our own PIA seems to contradict some of the things in the presentation regarding, we state that these changes will have no impact on Section V of the Unitary Status Plan regarding quality of education. Can you speak to that?
It won't have any impact because this is the program we've been mandated to run. So what you're speaking of is not a staffing issue, it's a whole programmatic overhaul where each DAPE program would receive 5 teachers so that you had 1 math, 1 science, 1 language arts, 1 elective perhaps, 1 ex-ed. That's an entirely different model that we have not been given permission or authorization to run. This is the same DAPE program in its original configuration and form since 1516. And ideally, absolutely, you want to have 5 teachers, and that's an entire reimagination and reconfiguration of the DAPE program. The DAPE program, since its inception, has always been a guided teaching model where work is collected from the homeschool, and it is essentially a classwork completion model where 1 teacher of record. And you could have a highly qualified math teacher in a DAPE classroom. They're still going to run into a student that they have to assist with English language arts. You can have a highly qualified English language arts teacher. They're going to run into a student that they're going to have to tutor for math and get information from the homeschool on how to do it. And that's been the challenge with the DAPE model. Another challenge with the DAPE model is when you have these satellite locations so far away from the homeschool, it's difficult to get high school teachers or middle school teachers to send the work because they're so far away, and then they themselves have 150, 160 students that they're dealing with a day. So I think separate and apart from this PIA, which only seeks, this particular request is only for the flexible teaching assignments, but if we're talking about a programmatic redesign of DAPE, our administration is certainly ready for that conversation because as you pointed out, board member Shaw, there's a lot to be addressed that we could probably do in a redesign that would have to come back through this process, performance impact analysis.
Okay. I do have a question, Dr. Trujillo. I'm sorry, Ms. Counts, did you have any?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Why can't every teacher have briefing with parents? I mean, why is there just the one lead? And because it doesn't seem like they're busy if we've got, kind of they're hanging out. So what is stopping that, I guess, my question.
Well, I think the idea behind having one designated person do that is consistency with communication going from family to family to family. One designated point of contact that interfaces with the leadership in terms of who's been met with. One point of contact to coordinate orientation activities, logistics, event planning, that kind of a thing. I think once the students get assigned their date teacher and they're actually placed there for the 20 days or the 40 days, at that point, Board Clerk Luna Rose, you would see that teacher take over that primary role of communication, daily assignments, attendance, behavior, all of that stuff.
Okay, but if there's a program coordinator, are they doing double the work? Are we doubling the work for them? You know what I mean?
So I'll go ahead and ask Yolanda to talk a little bit more about the roles and the responsibilities of the program coordinator and how it may differ from this lead staff member.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. So the program coordinator is overseeing the program itself, and right now trying to working with the lead teacher to make sure that we're providing some solid transitions back to the homeschool. That was a gap that we had last year. We were basically sending students back for one day of ISI, but no real strong success plan that students had. So the program coordinator right now is working with schools as well as the lead teacher, making sure that we're hearing what the schools need, but also making sure that we're establishing a success plan for students. And another plan that we have with the program coordinator and the lead teacher is to ensure that we're following up with students throughout the school year so that they don't end up back at DAPE. So the program coordinator right now really is working on some of those programmatic pieces that have been kind of missing for some time, but also those supports and working on developing a strong SEL PD for teachers, not only using the Character Strong curriculum that the district uses, but also ensuring that we're connecting with students on different levels.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Shaw.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Nunez, can you tell me what happened to the transition coordinator position, which is supposed to be on here if we're going back to 2018, 2019 levels?
Yes, we do have a transition coordinator. That's what we're referring to, the lead teacher this evening. So the lead teacher and the transition coordinator are the same, one and the same.
But they had their own position, right? In the past, I know the one we had, Leroy Johnson, he was certified to teach, and he did teach, but wasn't his actual job title transition coordinator?
No, they weren't. He did not have an actual title. They were all classified as teachers. There was no specific title in the budget that stated transition coordinator.
And so is the program coordinator going to assume the roles of the transition coordinator from whatever that was about?
No, according to the USP, we have to have a designated teacher position to do the transition coordinator responsibilities.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be looking into that question a little bit deeper. Let's see. What I want to say, though, is that, this plan seems very similar to August 2021 plan. And I think it's pretty clear that, we have vacancies in DAPE. Yes, there's not many students there now, but we know that each DAPE location definitely doesn't have maybe one has more than one certified teacher. But I feel like a better idea for finding things for the DAPE teachers to do is, if there's a DAPE teacher at a location without students, can we redirect that DAPE teacher to another location so they can support the students and the staff member at another location? And I would like to amend the motion on that note to have DAPE teachers redirected to another DAPE location to give students access to more than one certified teacher so that we can increase DAPE students' quality of education.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to Ms. Shaw's motion? It died for lack of a second, so I think we can move on. Dr. Trujillo?
I will say, great discussion, and in order to assuage any potential concerns about the use of DSEG-funded positions, part of our proposal that will expand for teachers serving outside of the department, we can switch funding sources. So if a DAPE teacher is used outside of the DAPE program and they're covering, say, a vacant math position, for the time they are in that position, we can use good old-fashioned vacancy savings from that vacant general math teacher position. That way we are absolutely 100,000% free and clear of any perception that we're misusing DSEG-funded positions. That's an adjustment we'll make. That way, if there's any concern out there about the usage of DSEG-funded positions in these types of assignments, we want to address that.
Okay. I would like to move the item. Oh.
For Ms. Nunez. Sorry. Just want to get to the bottom of some things before we vote.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Ms. Nunez, real quick, how many certified math teachers do you have currently at DAPE?
We have one.
Are you sure?
No, I'm not sure. I would need to look at my certifications.
Okay, and isn't it 45 days that, is it 45 days or 40 that students are allowed to stay in the DAPE program? Just to clarify.
Usually a long-term suspension lasts 45 days.
So it's 45? Mm-hmm. Okay, I know nobody seconded my motion, but I really want to implore you guys to really think about the students here, please.
Can, Mr. Ross, am I allowed to call the question?
I may have been out of the room. Was there an original motion in a second?
Yes, there was.
If there's no further discussion, then it's time to vote.
Okay. Yes, I would like to move the vote on this item. Ms. Pena, can we do a roll call vote on this?
Dr. Ravi?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
No.
Ms. Counts?
Yes.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes.
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes.
Okay. Item passes 4-1 with Ms. Shaw dissenting. Okay, next we're going to move to 7.4, consideration of performance impact analysis, relocation of DAPE classrooms.
Yes, Board Clerk Luna Rose, members of the governing board, we originally, when we were setting up the agenda, just logistically, we wanted to tackle this in one single agenda item. But per guidance from our legal counsel, the court wants two very specific actions. So public watching, forgive the redundancy. It was by design, in order to comply with the court. Our second performance impact analysis and the second aspect of overall adjustments that we want to make for DAPE this year's classroom location. Historically, our high school classrooms have been more centrally located, creating more of a tougher route for some of our biggest and most referring schools on the south side and the southwest side, like Cholla, Tucson High, and Pueblo. If you recall, it takes a Suntrans pass to try to get from the Star Pass area all the way into Project Moore. Same from the Pueblo neighborhood from there on 12th, which could be a little bit difficult. So we had some goals in terms of being able to establish greater accessibility and availability in all major sectors of the district, specifically central, east, and then accessibility for our west side and our south side schools. In the previous PIA presentation, I talked a little bit about DAPE and what the goals are. Same here. And then, of course, the enrollment. We know that enrollment trends at DAPE, they tend to be lower in the fall, and we get higher numbers in the spring. And, of course, we know that we're working with a 1-to-10 teacher ratio assigned by the court. So recommendation for us, we're going to start with high school. And it's important to note that pursuant to the court order that we received in March 22nd, we're no longer able to house middle school DAPE classrooms in the same place that we're housing high school DAPE programs. That was happening at the Southwest Center. We had to immediately comply. So, and that's an ongoing court order. So in order to comply with the March court order, we did have to move the high school classroom from the Southwest Center to Menlo Park. We are including it here just to get the formality and the recognition of the governing board that that's a part of our high school movement package, even though a separate court order required us to move a classroom from the Southwest Center so that we wouldn't have high school and middle school DAPE students there at the same facility. So the proposed movement of the high school classrooms that we're seeking this evening is in the spirit of greater accessibility. We know the majority of high school referrals are coming from Cholla, Tucson High, and Pueblo, which previously assigned all their students to Project More. And Project More would frequently go above its 1 to 10 because it was servicing pretty much all of the high schools on the big customers, Tucson High, Pueblo, and Cholla. And then I want to bridge back to what kind of transportation our high school kids were getting. You're getting SunTrans, right? Because those suspensions, those out-of-school suspensions, those long-term suspensions, they carry forward to the bus as well. The bus is kind of an extension of the classroom. So it's not like they can use existing TUSD routes. And it is hard. It's hard to get from Cholla to Project More on your own if you're using a bus. It's hard to get from the Pueblo neighborhood to Project More if you're using a bus. It's easier if you're TMHS. If you're Tucson High, it's a little bit easier. We wanted to really jump in and try to solve that problem. And then the adjustment will help to address some of the excessive 1 to 10 sizes that we were seeing at Project More. So the proposed movement of one DAPE high school classroom from Project More over to Palo Verde High School, we think is going to allow for greater access to Eastside referring high schools. Palo Verde's got a lot of space. Palo Verde is got a lot of resources on the ground there that we feel could be additive in nature to a DAPE program station there. And then with a DAPE high school program at Project More, and then at Menlo Park, and then at Palo Verde High School, we're going to have more of a well-balanced offering of DAPE programs, south side, west side, centrally located, and then east side. Pending governing board approval, we would like to implement this in this school year, this particular school year. This isn't going to happen tomorrow. If the governing board, if it's the governing board's will that we proceed, it's going to take some time to be able to coordinate this movement. This isn't something that's going to happen immediately, but this is something that we envision as being able to provide greater access to more students in more sectors of the district. The second part of our relocation proposal is the proposed movement of middle school. And we're talking about, I'm going to move over to the middle school. We're talking about middle school, and we're talking about also greater accessibility for a greater portion of students in a more highly populated part of our district. So we're looking at movement of at least one DAPE middle school classroom from Doolin. And it should be noted that for the entirety of 1819 and 1920, Doolin wasn't even open. The Doolin DAPE program only was open after a 2-year hiatus. I believe it was last year. And it was on a 2-year hiatus there, so it wasn't even really being utilized. But taking the classroom from Doolin and one of the middle school classroom from McGee and moving it to Catalina High School, we think is going to ensure a more centrally located proximity for referring middle schools from both east and from the west and from the central corridor. The middle school DAPE classroom at the Southwest Center, that has historically been the flagship DAPE classroom for Pistor, Lawrence, and Valencia. It does a lot of business. It's going to continue to do a lot of business. That DAPE classroom at Southwest Center, perfectly situated to handle 2 of the district's biggest middle schools and our 6-8 customer at Lawrence. So they're unaffected. So the recommendation is to open our first DAPE middle school classroom at Catalina this fall, and then hold off, look at enrollment, open up the second DAPE middle school classroom in the spring of '23, because what we do know about DAPE enrollment is low in the fall, and it'll start to kick up once we're back after Christmas break. And in all probability, that second DAPE classroom there at Catalina will be opening up here in the spring. It's important to note that we made a commitment to the court that we're not going to put middle school kids in the same facility as high school. So when I say Catalina High School, I want to be very specific. I'm not talking about Catalina High School, the main instructional wing, the actual high school campus itself, talking about the district support services building that's next door, separated by a gate, it's got its own separate entrance, it's a separate standalone facility. We house dropout prevention, we house Mexican American student services there, we've got refugee student support services there in that building, we've got a clothing bank. That's where we are seeking to house the classrooms to make sure that we're honoring what we agreed to in the discussions that we had with the former plaintiff representatives when the case was active, and also what we committed to doing with the court. When we looked at the performance impact analysis, we went through the same checklist of the USP. We looked at the court order, and the big question for us was, let's take a look at this court order. Are we compliant with all existing court orders? Answer is yes. When we looked at student assignment, these adjustments are not going to require any boundary changes. We're not changing any magnet programs. The magnet lottery process is unaffected. We're not changing the court order student achievement action plans. We don't find any impact there to student assignment. We don't see any impact to transportation, other than it's probably going to be easier for some of our kids to get from a Choya or a Pueblo to Menlo Park than it would be otherwise to get and haul all the way into Project More on their own with a SunTrans pass. We don't see any impact to administrative certificated staffing levels. That was handled in the previous presentation. We are under a court-ordered ratio of 1 to 10. We have been ordered to restore staffing levels to 18-19, and that's what we've done. That's what we funded. When we looked at Section 5 of the USP, Quality of Ed, those are all your GATE programs. That's Gifted and Talented. That's UHS. That's Access to ALE. That's English Language Acquisition Programs, XED. We don't have any aspect of this movement that's touching any of those programs. When we looked at USP requirements under discipline, again, we're not making any programmatic changes to the instructional model of DAPE. DAPE's instructional model is guided teaching. It's going to continue to be until it's redesigned and it goes through this process, which is something that's a great conversation we can have with our DAPE advisory committee and see if they can do a redesign. But at this moment, the existing programmatic model, which is guided teaching, is unaffected. When we look at our requirement for family and community engagement, yes, we will be housing these 2 middle school classrooms inside of our student support services building. There's Family Resource Center, there's a clothing bank, separate departments, separate budgets, separate resources. We're not going to be pulling over the family and community engagement staff to be covering DAPE classrooms. We're not going to be having our DAPE teachers going and working in the clothing banks. We're not mixing resources here. Both of these departments have separate budgets, and they'll continue to do so. We don't see any USP requirements here being compromised for extracurricular activities, and we don't see an impact on the district's programs or programmatic commitments in the areas of facilities and technologies. So that is our request here in this PIA. Just to recap, we covered ground. It looks like my clicker is stuck. To recap what we're asking for the high schools, we're asking for high school, the formal board recognition and approval to recognize the move, the high school classroom from the Southwest Center to Menlo Park, and then the formal recognition and approval of the governing board to move a high school classroom over to Palo Verde High School so that we could have 3 DAPE locations, east, central, and somewhat west and south. On the middle school side of the house, we are asking the movement of the middle school classroom at Doolin and the middle school classroom at McGee to be moved to the Catalina Student Support Services building for greater accessibility to east side centrally located families as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to governing board questions.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, ma'am.
So Dr. Trujillo, is there a need for expansion of DAPE in middle school, or do we have to have the same number of classrooms. I guess I'm just trying to figure out why we're going through the process of adding classes at Catalina when the Date Middle School classroom at Doolin was not in use, and it's like 4 minutes away from Catalina.
So two answers to that question. Number one, we're not looking at bringing the second middle school classroom online at Catalina yet. Our proposal is to start with one immediately now and then watch enrollment and see if we can bring the second classroom to start the spring semester. And two, this isn't an expansion model, it's an availability model. We know that there's a lot of concerns about DAPE. There's a lot of perceptions in the community that there are some perceived actions by the district to, in a sense, stunt its growth, limit its growth, or kill it. The other side of the argument, it could be that we're doing it intentionally to keep DAPE in the furthest reaches of the district from the schools that are referring the most. If we continue status quo, my fear is that narrative will start to ring true for a lot of people. If you're housing your DAPE, the predominant majority of your DAPE locations for middle school is way off in the east, that's a concern for us. So it's more of an availability and an equity of access piece for all sectors of the district. But to your original question, Board President Grijalva, it's not an expansion initiative, and we aren't going to bring the two classrooms online immediately. We're going to wait for the second till after the spring semester.
So then we'll have the middle school DAPE at Southwest Center and a middle school DAPE at Catalina High School.
Correct.
And that's it. And then the schools and Doolin and McGee, I'm assuming we're just trying to free up space, maybe give them some options on spreading out.
So Doolin,
I'm just trying to understand the need to move DAPE from Doolin and McGee.
so confirmation, these are the lone middle school classrooms, right? From Doolin, from Catalina, from McGee. It frees up space at Doolin and McGee for other school needs.
Okay.
And the need is, the original need is to get them a little less east and a little more central. So it's a little bit more accessible for all areas of the district. We don't just have the middle schools, the traditional middle schools that rely on these locations, like Gridley or Seacrest or McGee. You also have your 6-8s, okay, that run into DAPE placements as well. You'll have your 6-8s like Lawrence. You'll have your 6-8s like a Pueblo Gardens, 6-8s like Naylor, like Booth-Fickett, where those 6-8 kids, when they commit offenses that qualify for DAPE, we also have to take into consideration their location as well. So it's not just thinking about McGee and Seacrest, because if you think about it that way, well, what's wrong with McGee? Some of the biggest middle schools in the district are over there, right? Gridley, you got Gridley, you got McGee, you've got Seacrest. When you look at it more globally and you say, yeah, that's true, but now bring your K-8s into the mix. It's harder for Naylor to get out there. It's harder for Pueblo Gardens to get out there. What are we going to do, right, when we need to send Booth-Fickett 6th through 8th graders somewhere? What are you going to do about Vail? That's a big old central middle school. That's a little bit of a problem. So we're looking at it from just the general access to all 6th through 8th graders, not necessarily the standalone middle schools, and that's where Catalina, we feel, fits the bill.
And the move to Catalina, I'm sorry if anyone else is wanting to jump in. I can't see you from the screen, but you said that there was a court order that basically said that we had to move our middle school students from the high school, but we're creating a middle school classroom on a high school campus. So we can confirm that those middle school students are not going to be able to have access to the main, at dismissal, all of that. We're going to be able to confirm that they're not going to be able to have any access to the high school students on that campus?
We're going to have to. We have to comply with the court order. We need to make sure that daily DAPE bell schedule, that lunch is staggered, that they're not in the cafeteria, that the departure is staggered, that the arrival is staggered. They're in a separate standalone building that has absolutely no high school instruction going on in it. So we feel that this is probably the best location that can fit the bill.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. I am very concerned about this middle school DAPE change of location and moving them to a high school campus. I think it clearly violates the court order. And from what happened last year at Catalina, when there was a middle school students at the DAPE program, because they were short-staffed, that a middle school student in the DAPE program left the Family Resource Center and started wandering around campus. It's not difficult to leave the Family Resource Center, and in fact, it is pretty much just on the left side of the high school, and right underneath the building is the PE location, or they do dance classes there, I don't know, but when I visited once, there were a ton of high school students right by the Family Resource Center. They were up on the staircase, right by the door, you know, loitering. I think this poses a huge security risk. I think it's very inappropriate, and I feel like we can find a classroom at one of our middle schools that would be a better fit for our middle school DAPE students. Are you guys comfortable with middle school students being on a high school campus? I feel like it's a great temptation for these students. You're a middle school student, you're on a high school campus, and you know you already have issues with authority. It's too much temptation.
Ms. Count.
Dr. Trujillo, what is the reasoning besides Doolin? I don't think is at full capacity of enrollment, and there should be extra space there. It's right next to Catalina. Is it possible to keep it at Doolin for that central location?
That's why we go through this process.
Yeah.
You know, we're not married to a particular location. This is what we're proposing because we see the greatest amount of resources available in this building. If it's not the board's will, my general need is to get it less east.
Mhm.
Okay, Doolin is way less east than having it all the way out there at McGee. So we certainly, you wouldn't see a lot of pushback from the administration there.
Yeah.
Okay, if the concern is the middle school, the presence of the middle school kids, high school, I will say that you have several initiatives around the district where 8th graders travel to high schools to take algebra. They take advanced algebra. And so I know we have some of the CE Rose freshmen and some of the CE Rose 8th graders and some of the Hollinger 8th graders, they go and they take algebra at Pueblo. And we've seen some of this work happen between Booth-Fickett and Palo Verde as well. So it does happen in pockets. Now, granted, we're dealing with 8th graders, okay? It's a big difference sometimes in dealing with 6th graders, so I don't want to just say
And
that-
kiddos that are in DAPE
Correct,
versus...
and kiddos
yeah.
in DAPE versus kids that are taking advanced
AP,
mathematics.
yeah.
Absolutely. So, but if it does make the board feel better, we can certainly explore the Doolin option.
Is there space at Doolin?
Doolin, we're going to have to get in there and do a building, kind of do a building walkthrough to see where we can house it. I will say that Doolin is not unlike our middle school, all the standalone middle schools right now. It has its challenges with declining enrollment.
Mhm.
And that is not a school that's up in enrollment. So
Mhm.
there's some space.
Yeah. I would probably be more comfortable keeping that middle school site at Doolin for right now. And then if the situation changes or we need that extra space, revisiting that in the future. But it makes sense if that it would be stay at Doolin if they have the space.
Dr. Shaw.
So let me understand from my fellow governing board members, is the proposal then to keep the Doolin site and close the McGee site, move that to Doolin instead of Catalina?
That's what I would suggest.
I would ask the same consideration that if it's the board's will, that it's Doolin, we start with the one classroom at Doolin, watch enrollment, and get the second one online for the second semester, if Catalina is not the destination.
The second room at Doolin, is that what your recommendation is? The second room at Doolin?
Yes.
In the spring?
Yes.
I think I could support something where we
Yeah, I'm not particularly comfortable with the middle school. The high school one is fine, I'm okay with, but the middle school one, you know, it is a different set of students. And not to say that, you know, there's anything bad, but they have different priorities. So I think closing McGee, moving them to Doolin is probably the best route at the moment.
Miss Luna Rose?
Yes, Ms. Grijalva.
I'm not necessarily opposed to having our middle school students on our high school campuses. I'm a little concerned that the court order was explicit in saying we don't want middle school kids and high school kids together. We moved them from Southwest for that reason, and then I feel like this would be an easy issue for somebody to bring up. That's my only issue. I don't necessarily have an issue with high school and middle school students attending campus like classes together and stuff, if it makes sense, because I think that might be a model that someone's going to bring up one day. So I don't want to definitely close the door there. And I'm not suggesting even that Doolin is the best fit. I mean, I just have a concern with that makeup. So I would be comfortable moving the high school item and then encouraging staff to kind of explore some other options. I mean, maybe Duffy would be a good option. We have space here. We have space there too.
Okay. So, oh, Ms. Shaw, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Dr. Trujillo, who made these recommendations? Was it district staff or the DAPE committee?
This is district staff.
Okay, and I asked that because I visited Catalina Family Resource Center in June and was told that basically the dropout prevention people were moved or were about to be moved and told that they were going to be moved for this DAPE classroom.
So I will say that this original proposal is more than a year old. We were directed to bring it as it originally was crafted to the governing board through the PIA process. That was the commitment we made to the court, that we were responsible for giving the governing board an opportunity to publicly vote on the moves that the court didn't want us making. That's why we got the court order. That's why we were directed to engage in the PIA process to come before you with the original plan, okay? If it's not the board's will to proceed with the original plan, then we go back, we monitor and adjust. The DAPE committee was not in existence a year and a half ago when conversations started about how are we gonna cover all of these online classes, how are we gonna deal with COVID, how are we gonna deal with kids in quarantine, how are we gonna do with the reduced numbers at DAPE, where could we move things? But it is in existence now, right? So any sort of redesign, any sort of direction that we're now receiving from the board, that DAPE committee now becomes a stakeholder at the table. So that's where we are right now in terms of why this original plan is back before you. We needed to honor that commitment to the court. And I understand the feedback that we're receiving is that we're not necessarily 100% comfortable that even though we're in separate buildings, we're still a little too close to the high school, which could compromise compliance with the court order.
I understand that. My concern, though, is that programmatic changes are happening in the DAPE program before it comes to the governing board.
I will repeat, there are no programmatic changes. We are not changing the DAPE programmatic model. It is a guided teaching model. We are not changing the instructional model, which is the definition of the programmatic model. We are not doing anything other than it's a guided teaching model. Now, if the board is wanting information on logistics, location, that's a separate conversation. As a rule of thumb, we do ask our leadership team to be transparent with employees who will be affected by any potential change that may be discussed at a governing board meeting. We don't want the dropout prevention team hearing all of this discussed for the first time. So though it may be disappointing for them to hear that they might potentially be moving, it was better to talk to them a week ago, 2 weeks ago, to prepare this may happen. Have they physically been moved? They're still there. They're physically working day to day. okay?
They have,
And so pending this action tonight will determine the way that we go. Okay,
They
in
had their
terms of-
furniture moved. They had their closets blocked with furniture for the DAPE classroom. It was more than just, hey, you might
Okay.
be moved. It was they're getting ready to move.
Duly
And
noted.
so I just want, if the governing board does have control now, I would like to see that in action.
Duly noted.
Miss Luna Rose,
Yes, ma'am.
can we vote on the proposed move of the high school classroom?
Mr. Ross?
I don't believe I've heard a motion at all.
No, there's actually.
I'll go ahead and move that.
All right, I will second. So before us is a motion to move the high school to go as presented with the high school and.
If I could make
Yeah.
one recommendation, because it is an action item. So the board's motion is the board's motion. It's not, I'm not involved with the motion you just discussed. I would only request of the board that you request to table the middle school location proposal. That way we're eligible to bring it back, because it is an action item, and maybe direct us to bring it back at a future governing board meeting. Because my understanding is if we don't get the motion to table, Mr. Ross, it could be a no vote, which means that the administration may be limited in terms of bringing it back. Is that?
I think we could come up with procedural ways to bring it back, but if the board can either combine what Dr. Trujillo said in the current motion from Ms. Grijalva, or do more than one motion on the item.
Miss Luna Rose, I'll
Yes.
combine them and say that I would move the proposed movement of one DAPE high school classroom from Project More to Palo Verde, which would mean that we would have a DAPE high school program at Project More, Menlo Park, and Palo Verde High School, and table the discussion regarding the middle schools and give staff an opportunity to bring that item back.
Okay, and I will agree with that. Second.
Does that suffice, Dr. Trujillo?
Thank you very much, and the opportunity to bring back the middle school with some alternatives.
Okay. Yolanda, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Oh, can you seconded and then you ask, is there any further discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any further discussion?
I have one more thing to discuss. I'm really not comfortable with the Palo Verde DAPE site. It's in the basement of the Family Resource Center. It's just not conducive to learning. And Project More is a beautiful site. They have low enrollment. I think the Project More site was, to me, the premier DAPE location. And I would like us to keep both of those DAPE classrooms at Project More. And I would also advise my colleagues up here, we were recommended by the courts to follow their directives, bring it back to 2018, 2019. And yet we have all these little asterisks by each court ask. And so can we just simply follow the court order? Can we just simply do that? I don't understand why we're shooting ourselves in the foot, adding all kinds of different things that really don't make sense.
I'm comfortable moving forward. We have a vote. Mr. Lord?
Yes, and I am as well. So if there's not any further discussion, Ms. Pena, roll call vote, please.
Dr. Ravi?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
No.
Ms. Counts?
Yes.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes.
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes.
Okay, item passes 4-1 with Ms. Shaw dissenting. Okay, now we're off to 7.5, appointment of governing board member to represent Tucson Unified School District as a district delegate to the Arizona School Board Association, ASBA, Delegate Assembly, and discussion and consideration of action to approve the ASBA draft 2023 political agenda and direct the district's delegate to the ASBA Delegate Assembly to represent the board's determined position. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, Governing Board Clerk Luna Rose. I would like to turn this over to Governing Board discussion. The board has two tasks in 7.5, either to accept or reject the Arizona School Board Association's legislative agenda, and also make its decision in terms of who will serve as its representative in the delegate assembly. So I will turn it over to you, Governing Board Clerk Luna Rose, to lead the discussion, your colleagues.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Trujillo. So I served as the delegate assembly last year for the ASBA conference. It's the end of their law conference. And we do vote on this every year, so I'd like to open it up for discussion. I would like to put that I am willing and able to be the delegate again, but unless somebody really, really wants to, I'm happy to step up. The assembly is on Saturday, September 10th, and it's up in Scottsdale. So, yes, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. I'm actually going to be attending the law conference, so I'm comfortable being the delegate if you guys would like me to be.
I can understand you. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, forgive me. I just said that I am going to be attending the law conference the 3 days before that day, and so I am willing to be the delegate if the board unites with it. Thank you.
So, Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes.
There's other meetings, right, as far as being the ASBA delegate?
Yes, there are.
And so can you kind of outline those and if Ms. Shaw's willing and you're comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with sending whoever wants to attend the law conference and the other ASB trainings. But I just want to make sure that we all know what the delegate is responsible for.
Okay, so attached to this item is the proposed political agenda. So the delegate assembly, what the delegate does is they actually, it's a very precise process. All of us as board members can go. We can go, but only one person can vote. When I went last year, our other sister school districts, Amphi, Vale, Sunnyside, they had several of the board members go, but only one can cross a certain line to go in and vote with a clicker. But then they all confer. So it is open if any board member wants to go. There is a law conference before that to go over school law and specifically kind of a lot of stuff that Mr. Ross and Mr. Aronoff talked to us about and any pending legislation. And then throughout the year, ASBA, there are, they do online Zoom meetings. There's lunch and learns. They do another conference in the spring. I know they're also going to the different counties coming up very soon. I do believe they're going to be hosted at Sahuarita Unified in the next couple weeks. So I highly encourage, I know that there's been some stickiness with ASBA in the past, but they are our voice on a larger scale. And I highly recommend. And since I already went and Ms. Shaw wants to go, I'm happy to step aside. I've also thought about attending the law conference myself, just because I haven't gone, but I'm okay with that. Any other discussion?
Yeah, the question is just if we're assigning the delegate, is that just this one? Will you continue to represent us, or Ms. Shaw going to represent us for the school year?
Well, as a delegate, you technically do it for the school year, but there's no other delegate meetings. There's no delegate duties except for going to this particular meeting.
Okay.
So I guess we should probably vote on who will.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and move that Ms. Shaw represents us at the ASBA delegate meeting.
I'll second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you all for representing us. Thank you, Ms. Luna Rose, for representing us for the last 2 years.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Ms. Shaw, for your willingness to go.
And then I do believe we still have to vote on the action to approve the draft political agenda. So this, again, is done every year, and this is what Ms. Shaw will be voting on and agree to. So If you want to take a look, if you haven't already. I'm okay with the changes, but if there's any, I will open it up for discussion.
I mean, it's, Ms. Luna Rose,
Yes.
it's not perfect, none of these are, and there's some things that I wish were added, but I'm fine with moving this forward. It doesn't limit us, it has a lot of other categories. And the likelihood of, we don't have leadership changes at the state, the likelihood of any of these going through is probably not strong.
I'll second.
Okay. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, item passes. So thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Shaw, for you're willing to step up. Okay, we're on to 7.6, Governing Board Policy BEDH, Public Participation at Board Meetings. New policy, second reading.
Yes, Governing Board Clerk Luna Rose, members of the board, it's a policy-rich evening from here on out. Leading us through these policy items will be our Associate General Counsel, Mr. Michael Aronoff.
You got it?
Let's go, Kevin. Let's go.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
So BEDH is the first of 5 policies we're going to talk about tonight. This is the second read for this policy, which is titled Public Participation at Board Meetings. This is the call to the audience policy. The policy, just so everybody knows, was posted, for the first read was in July. It was posted for public comment. And we did receive, I think, 3 comments, which were sent to the board, and I think only 2 were actually received in time to be posted on the agenda today. But the this policy effectively encodes the authority that the board already has in almost every respect, except one. There is this aspect of it which, not to say that this isn't authorized, but there is this aspect of it that allows or that requires someone who is addressing the board to note what the topic of their comments is going to be, and then the board will give priority at call to the audience to those who are speaking to something that is on the agenda. We've gone over all of this before, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it. I do want to just address a couple things specifically. This is not a policy. This isn't revising a policy we currently have. There is currently no written board policy on call to the audience. The comments that were received seem to raise concerns about this idea that that the board would, that this policy would allow the board to limit, for example, who could speak on a certain topic, saying, if there's multiple speakers addressing the same topic, that the board could effectively have them select like a spokesperson. To be clear, that's a power that the board already has. Everything written in the policy about what the board can do in terms of navigating call to the audience and how it's presented, as well as what happens if, for example, there is a disruption during call to the audience. Those policies and practices would be effectively brought down into writing, whereas right now they exist, but they're not written down for TUSD. So this would give the public notice about exactly what authority the board has and how it would wield it, and it would provide that guidance in written form. So happy to answer any questions about it if you have them. And this is, I think I said, this is the second read, so if the board votes to adopt the policy today, it will be effective immediately.
Okay. Board members, any discussion?
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, Ms. Grijalva. And then
So
Dr.
the
Shaw, and then Ms. Shaw.
Okay, so the question that I have is, way back in the day, we used to require name and topic. And we also asked for their affiliation, connection, whatever to TUSD, whether you're a taxpayer, you're a parent, you know, it asked like what school your child attends, if you're a student, and it was helpful in that if we had a parent that complained about a specific issue but didn't cite like what school, staff could then go to that principal or the school and say, hey, how are we addressing this? Sometimes people get nervous or they don't have enough time to sort of give us all the information we need. So I think requesting that information would be helpful. And because I do know that we've had a couple of people that spoke at Call to the Audience that don't really have a connection with TUSD, but because they're a larger percentage of the people that come to Call to the Audience, because we don't have a lot of people right now, it's this perception that the community is outraged, but really it's like, you know, 3 people. So I would like to make sure that we request that. I do understand that we can't legally require somebody to state their affiliation or connection to TUSD, but I would like to request that and that it be standard, because right now we're not, because people are being introduced, we're not really necessarily requiring people to sort of introduce themselves.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Grijalva. Dr. Shaw.
Thank you, Ms. Luna Rose, and thank you to our legal team for taking a lot of the feedback over the last few months when this was first proposed, I think back in the spring or discussed in the spring, and bringing it to this. And just kind of reiterate what you said, that this is a new policy, but it memorializes standard board practice, you know, well before at least the 4 of us here were on the board, and practices that Ms. Grijalva has been doing for decades now on this board. And so I remember coming to Call to the Audience, filling out that sheet of paper, and having this process be in place in terms of how long the Call to the Audiences were for the meetings, how long the speakers had. So this is not new policy we're trying to create de novo, but really memorializing what has already existed in standard practices of the governing board here, so that we can ensure that different voices are heard, that we're getting different perspectives, and getting feedback about active items that we'll be voting on and making decisions on as a governing board. And so I want to thank you for taking that feedback and kind of making sure that the audience understands what we're trying to accomplish here tonight. And I think in terms of Ms. Grijalva's point, you know, that's kind of minimum requirements of, you know, topic and who, and then we can always request more information, and not make it mandatory, of course, but try to get more information to understand, you know, where they're coming from, you know, what their connection to the district is, and how we can best help meet the needs of stakeholders in our district.
Thank you. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. I want to unite with what Ms. Grijalva asked, if we can maybe add to the Call to the Audience list just another like location or school site, so we just have more information. Also, I could have sworn that when I read this the first time that it had Call to the Audience, walk-up Call to the Audience.
It's in there.
Is that in there, or am I looking at the wrong one?
Yeah, it's
okay,
there.
I must be looking at the old one. Okay. But what I don't like on this, I do agree we need a policy, but I really worry that you know, this whole grouping is going to limit a lot of voices, because, you know, certain people might have, I'll be talking about something, you know, substitutes or, you know, masks or whatever, but they might have a different opinion, and they might not be an organized group. It might just seem that way. And so I feel like we should really keep the good things about our Call to the Audience, make it more accessible, but really, you know, giving anyone the authority to, like, cut people off or, you know, assign one person from an alleged group to speak. I think I just don't think we should move down that route.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, Ms. Grijalva.
What we can do, which if anyone else has an issue with the group, because I do understand that a lot of times they're not necessarily together, but they're all there united on an issue. So if someone goes up to speak and they agree, they'll stand up. So it appears to be like they're an organized group, but that might not necessarily be the case. We can always, or the chair or the clerk can always say, you know, we have 20 minutes allotted for call to the audience. So if you're here, I mean, if it's a big group, like if you're here and you want to make sure that your opinion is heard, you might want to delegate that, because, you know, it depends on the board whether we extend the call or not. And I don't know that that necessarily has to be in policy, but I would like us, and I don't know if this is regulation or whatever, but when we have to enforce speaker etiquette, like Ms. Luna Rose had to do earlier today, at what point are speakers restricted? Like, you can't come back you can't speak for a month, or at what point does it become abusive where, you know, we shouldn't have to tolerate that as board members, and our staff shouldn't have to tolerate that. As staff members in our community shouldn't have to hear it. So while I understand that there's a freedom of speech issue, when people consistently violate our governing board policy, should we in this policy outline what the consequences for that might be?
Mr. Ross?
I mean,
Or Mr. Arnall?
I can address so we do have policy KFA, which would address, if we're talking about restricting somebody from basically setting foot into the meeting for some period of time, I think we would be following the dictates of that policy and then that guidance. You know, the BEDH, or the proposed BEDH, has structures for enforcing etiquette during the meeting, but for example, if there were something that were disruption in violation of, for example, Arizona statute about disrupting a board meeting, then we could certainly look at, you know, taking other steps under policy KFA, which would, I think, be a separate process.
I do think that we need to be really proactive in addressing those situations and having consequences, because I really would like to discourage people from disrupting our meeting, having to stop our meeting repeatedly. I mean, if there's consistent behavior and threatening behavior, I do think it needs to be addressed right away, before the next board meeting. So we don't have, you know, I just think that there's some situations where it's definitely warranted. But unless anyone is tied to the group sort of language, if that's a hindrance unless legal wants to tell me why it's super important, but if that's a hindrance in this item passing today, I would be comfortable with some sort of optional language, like if a group is identified or something like that, because I think that's the one that is causing the most public concern, is that group, the group paragraph, and then the two bullets after that.
And
Oh,
I'm sorry, go ahead. And
Dr. Shaw, okay.
Well, just really quickly to the group one. So the way I read the group phrases here, it's not like there's a group of people that all agree or came together, but, you know, this is the Raytheon Employee Resource Group speaking on behalf of, you know, what we support on this issue, or this is El Rio's group, you know, coming in, or this is, you know, certain like club or organization, you know, from the U of A, you know, we support this or we're against this. Like, not like just a random group of folks who all agree or are friends, but, you know, this is like they're representing an organization in our community to speak, you know, in favor or against a certain thing that we're discussing or a certain issue in TUSD. So that's how I read this group thing here, and how I would imagine it be used in the future. Like there's an organization or a group of individuals that are working together, and they met, they support this issue, and they want to come here to speak about this, as opposed to just, you know, folks who are here that want to speak on it, but all align in some way. So I'll support this with or without the group phrase in here, as the rest of the board deems appropriate. But that's how I interpret this.
Yeah, Ms. Luna Rose?
Yeah.
Just one thought where it says, maybe if we say groups that wish to express their views are encouraged to select one speaker to represent something like that, you know, like, so it's like you're encouraged to because of limited call to the audience. But if it's that confusing, I mean, we have that authority as the board anyway.
So could I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just kind of to be clear, that whole section, which starts with, you know, all the procedures, all of these are effectively time management tools that the board has. And so if, for example, you had a meeting where you had a series of people who all came to say, you know, to spend their 3 minutes saying effectively the same thing about, you know, we don't want the district to impose a mask mandate, the board could decide, so that other issues could also be discussed that day, that, okay, we understand that there's a portion of the community that doesn't want a mask mandate. We've heard your reasoning behind it. We're going to stop discussing this or listening to people on this so that we can get to other issues that people might want to discuss at call to the audience, depending on how many speakers you had and how much time you had allotted. It is not to say that the board ever has to do it. It is simply something that the board may do. It's within the authority as a reasonable time management tool for the efficient operation of the board meeting. And it is an authority that's explicitly recognized by the Attorney General. And so it would be sort of weird for the board to take that authority away from itself. But again, it's the choice of whether or not to exercise that authority that really seems to be the flashpoint. And ultimately, that's, you know, whether or not to exercise that authority is always going to be up to the board and the person running the meeting.
So if I can clarify, meaning that if we took that sentence as the groups that wish, we can still under our purview do that.
That's right, and that's why I was saying before that all of these things are really they're putting into policy things that the board is already authorized to do, and so it's effectively a fair warning to members of the public and a notice that, look, these are tools that the board has. It's not to say in any case that the board is going to use these, but this is how this is going to work. These are things that can happen. Please don't be surprised if you march in with an army of 20 people who all want to spend 3 minutes saying the same thing if we cut you off at some point so that we can get to other speakers.
Okay. Mr. Ross?
Thank you, Ms. Luna Rose. I was just going to respond to Ms. Grijalva's point about the board's ability to, in the moment, address disruptions of the meeting. You do have that ability. The chair does. That's just basic meeting management. And to kind of follow up on what Mr. Aronoff was saying about policy KFA, that does have, you know, the ability for the board to restrict access to any facility if there's a pattern of that sort of behavior. I think in this context of a governing board meeting, that's something that should be, you know, really thought about, you know, hard before that kind of action is done. But you do have that ability. Nobody can disrupt a board meeting. You know, this is a meeting of the board. It's not a meeting of the mob, and you know, you have business to conduct. So you have the ability to control your meetings, and you do have that tool in KFA to address that behavior, which is why we have made a cross-reference to it here.
Okay. Dr. Shaw.
So I'll move the item with the edit of, as proposed, that groups that wish to express their views shall be encouraged to select one speaker.
Okay. And I'll second. But any more discussion, Ms. Shaw?
Yes, I was wondering if we could also add, just to be more explicit in the, speaker etiquette, just maybe a little bit more about, like, we don't have to go into what policy KFA says, but maybe under enforcing etiquette, the last bullet is, you know, the district has the discretion to anyone who, violates these rules, whether it's 1 or 2 times, just a plan of action for those who constantly disrupt our meetings. I think it should be explicitly stated in there.
So I'll second that amendment to my motion.
Okay. And just for discussion, thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Shaw. I think even though somebody could look up KFA, that, nice having an asterisk so they don't have to, even though we have it cross-referenced, because it just makes things easier. So any more discussion? Okay. Call the vote.
2 votes, 1 an amendment, and then 1 the whole resolution.
Okay. So amendment, take a vote on the amendment, Dr. Ravi's amendment, or I'm sorry, Ms. Shaw's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And then vote on 7.6 as amended. Can I get a roll call vote? Please.
Dr. Ravi?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Counts?
Yes.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes.
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes.
Okay. Item passes unanimously. Thank you so much. Okay, 7.7, Governing Board Policy JICJ, Student Use of Cell Phones and Other Electronic Devices, Revision, Second Reading. Mr. Aronoff.
Thank you. So JICJ is an update which attempts to basically clarify what is a gap in our current policy where we were sending people to the Code of Conduct to look for guidance about cell phone searches, and then the Code of Conduct was sending people right back to policy, and nowhere did we have some explicit statement of what our standard would be for cell phone searches. This is also a second read. It was posted for public comment. It was posted for a little more than a month. We did not receive any public comment on this policy. And so the language that you see in here in that large blue block, this language effectively comes straight from Fourth Amendment standards for cell phone searches, clarifying in particular what gets complicated with phones is the scope of a search. That just because you can search for example, a photograph doesn't mean that you can go through somebody's text messages and vice versa. So it tries to clarify the scope of the cell phone search, and that if the only violation is possession of the cell phone, that doesn't justify going into and searching the cell phone.
I'll move.
Okay. Ms. Counts moves. I'll second. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 All ayes? Although opposed? Okay. Item passes unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Aronoff. All right, we are moving on to 8.1, School Year 22-23 Proposal for Supplemental Compensation for Vacancy Coverage, Ex-Ed Teacher Transition Stipend, and Hard-to-Fill Daily Rate for Subs. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, Governing Board Clerk Luna Rose, members of the Governing Board, thank you for this opportunity also to address some extended compensation needs. I think you're seeing a theme here: vacancy coverage, vacancy coverage, vacancy coverage. And that's true. We've got 2 proposals to review with you this evening. One on the exceptional education side of the house, and then the other to try to bolster our sagging sub-fill rates that we've seen around the district for schools successfully securing vacancy coverage for daily and long-term assignments. So I wanted to just give you a snapshot of our 10-day fill rate for August 4th through 10th. And you can see there's roughly, give or take, 22 schools here on this list that are as low as a 36% fill rate. And sadly, the highest fill rate doesn't even hit 70%. They're at 66.67. When you take a look at, and this is just kind of the first 10 days of school, you'll see the number of subs needed for each particular school. And then, of course, you'll see the successful percentage of subs attained, and absence is covered over there on the right side. When you take a look at, we talked about not just difficulties here when we just ran a 10-day report for the first 10 days of school, August 4th through August 10th. We also wanted to take a look at how we finished the year in the spring semester with some of the furthest schools out there that also present challenges for daily and long-term subs. And so while this first screen takes a look at how we did just generally the first August 4th through August 10th, we also wanted to give you a snapshot of what 21-22 looked like with some of the furthest schools out there from when you look at our borders. You look like Banks and Johnson and Lawrence and Pister and Valencia and BC, and we see that the 21-22 percentage rates are very, very troubling. So our job in here is to try to make sure that we put each and every single school in the optimum position to be able to secure a maximum amount of subcoverage every single day. Our data tells us that we need to make subbing at these particular campuses a little bit more attractive than it is now. So what we're proposing is an additional $15 a day. That's going to run a total cost of $47,400. I think, or $460. I don't have my glasses right now, but I do believe it's $47,460 for the additional $15. And we're looking at the group of schools here on slide 1 and the addition of Banks, Johnson, Lawrence, Pister, Valencia, and VC. We know that we have a year's worth of data that says that these schools are hard to get to, and we want to make it more attractive distance-wise. So we feel that the additional $15 a day hopefully will make these assignments a lot more attractive so we can increase the fill rates that we're seeing sagging right now a little bit. The second part of tonight's proposal is a recognition of the tremendous sacrifice that the district's ex-ed educators, teachers, and parapros alike are having to make in terms of programmatic realignments. We have areas of the district, schools in the district that have seen higher populations of ex-ed students come in that have a greater demand for service, while we've seen other schools in other sectors of the district have smaller populations of ex-ed students. We realize it's a hardship to ask one of our hardworking ex-educators, whether parapro or lead teacher, to make the move from one school that doesn't necessarily have the large caseload to another school to help ex-educators at the larger school that might be pushed to the limit with their caseloads as case carriers. We know that there's going to be an increased cost of gas. There's going to be an adjustment cost in terms of getting to the new school and the new location and handling the new assignment. So for the 14 ex-ed teachers that are eligible for this relocation stipend, we're looking at a total amount of the projected funding necessary to offer the stipend in the amount of $500. I believe it says 500, yeah, per semester. So $7,000 per semester. We're looking at $8,400, I believe. Is that what it says? I'm sorry, my eyes here.
Yes.
It keeps coming back to it. For a total of $14,000 for the academic year, for a total of $16,800 in total employee-related expenses for the group of 14. Our proposed funding sources, Dr. Salmon is here for any more detailed specific questions on usage of IDEA. It's one of the more substantial federal grants that we see. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act affords us over $25 million around there year to year for services for exceptional education students. So we're looking at a partial funding source, and then of course we have our maintenance and operations budget. Those are our two proposals this evening for governing board consideration for assistance with coverage.
Okay, thank you. Board members, I'll open it up for discussion. Ms. Counts.
So this is a permanent move, or just the move for the ex-ed teachers just for this year, this school year?
So that's a great question. This is a programmatic alignment to make sure that we're meeting current staffing needs.
Mhm.
But every time that we go in and we do what's called equalization, where we look at each school's ex-ed population, then we look at inside each school, how many ex-ed teachers do they have, and then we look at their case carrier class size or case carrier caseload limits. And if we're exceeding that, that means movement. That means we've got to go to other schools where we've got a little bit more room on case carrier caseloads where we would be able to move some teachers across. That changes sometimes. So I'm going to bring on Dr. Salmon to give a little bit more information on the equalization.
Good evening. Thank you, governing board members. So that is correct. We have about 14 teachers who have lower caseloads, and so they are able to provide some additional supports on campuses who don't have an ex-ed teacher, or their caseloads are so high they need some additional support. And so we are still reviewing those numbers, and so we're not completely removing the teacher from the original assigned campus. We're just kind of loaning them. And so we are coming up with an agreement based on the current caseloads that the teacher has and their availability to support additional sites. So if site A, where the teacher originated, get more students, so then that teacher may come back and support that site more. So what we're looking at for most of our teachers is a 0.5, so half of their time will be spent supporting another campus to provide direct services for students with IEPs where there's a vacancy.
So it's 0.5 additional, but it's only $500 a semester.
So it's like half of their time would be spent supporting the additional school, and because we know that's a additional ask or a task, we're just giving that stipend just as a thank you for doing the additional work. So they're continuing to get their full payment that they would get anyway, but we're just asking them to spread
So
their time.
they're 0.5 at their original school and then 0.5, okay, with that incentive of the 500. And now is it requirement or is it optional?
Well, it depends on the situation. So for example, we had a situation where a teacher only had 4 students on their caseload with their caseload limit being 20.
Mhm.
And so then we had another site where a teacher might have a caseload of 27 and their limit is 20, so they're over. So we're looking at balancing and equalizing that. In a situation where the caseloads are that low, then it's not necessarily optional. Kind of 10 is the number where it's over 10, then we start looking at another way to provide the services. So if there's already more than 10, we typically are not asking them to support at a different site.
I think it's great, and I like logistically how you've explained it. I just think 500 is a little low considering that yeah, there is the transportation, the driving, and then your mind is split between 2 different sites, and that's kind of hard to wrap your head around sometimes. So I personally would be comfortable with $1,000 per semester because this is such specialized work. That would be my only recommendation for the change here. But thank you for your thorough explanation.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Shaw.
Thank you, Ms. Luna-Rose. Thank you for coming here and explaining this as well. And so I think back to Ms. Count's first question. Is this just for the year we're talking about, and this proposal is just for this academic year?
This academic year.
Okay, and we're not looking for anything permanent here. And then I have questions about the substitute teacher target schools. So is the proposal what's on slide 3, these specific 6 schools, any substitute teacher going there will receive $15 additional on top of the, I believe, $145 or $140 is their daily rate. And if that's the case, why were these 6 schools chosen? Were they the 6 least filled schools, or is it a geographical location issue? I see one that's at 60% fill, and some, one that's at 21% fill. So it's a big, variation here. So how were these 6 particular skills?
So what we did
selected?
is we did 2 things. So everything on first slide is just a straight up look at the district. How did the district do with fill rates from August 4th through the 10th?
Mm-hmm.
And these are schools that emerged. Then we said, well, now let's take a look at the southwestern sector of the district where we know we struggled last year. How did they do to end the year? And this is what emerged.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't emerge immediately in our first 5 or 6 days from August 4th to August 10th, we wanted to make sure and say, all right, you're not here yet in our first week. What did you do last year, 21, 22? And that's what emerged. And so just to kind of give you an idea, getting even 70% is problematic. You can see how far below schools are, 70%. even 60% vacancy coverage means 40% of your classroom coverage needs are not met, and people are working on their prep hours. So you can see that abysmally low, 30s, 40s, 20s. These are areas that we're looking to shore up. And you're right, it's the additional $15 an hour on the most recently approved governing board designated daily rate of pay.
$15 a day.
$15 a day. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I had a question, Dr. Trujillo.
Yeah.
So when you were going to take the slide, where we're going to get the money from, so you said it was $25 million for IDEA, and then roughly?
Around there, yeah.
Okay.
And because of, it's not an exorbitant amount of teachers, it's 14. So it's not necessarily going to break the bank either on the IDEA side of the house or the M&O side of the house.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah, sometimes these initiatives are split funded. Dr. Salmon knows more intimately what the funding capacity inside of IDA. I know more intimately M&O. I'm sure, the number 14 is not an insurmountable number in terms of if the board did want to entertain something a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah, because I do agree with Ms. Counts. I think 1,000, these are really hard to fill positions, and it's something that the district has struggled with. So I could be in favor of 1,000 for this school year.
In our conversations, we really wanted to do something.
Per semester.
We really wanted to do something for the ex-ed teachers because a lot of this was so fluid. When you're dealing with enrollment of exceptional education students, you don't know from school to school to school what kind of population you're going to have until fairly late in the summer. We know that, though I'm not going to name particular private schools or charter schools or anything outside of our TUSD, but we do know that such schools typically don't have the most hospitable environment for students with disabilities. And we see families that have their heart set on going to, say, private school A or charter school B, only to be told at the last minute that they only have general accommodations available and that they may want to take a look at TUSD because we've got transportation, we've got aids. So you see groups of ex-ed families hitting us late July. And so we recognize that that's a hardship when our ex-ed leadership team says, okay, we've had this influx of ex-ed students hitting us mid-July all the way through the first week of school. Now we do need to realign. And it's a hardship. There's expenses. You're driving from school to school. But absolutely, doing a little bit more, I don't think you're going to see any pushback from us. And then I don't think that we need to tell any of you that writing an IEP, managing an IEP, keeping track of IEP commitments and provisional enforcement, that is hours and hours and hours and hours of work for just one student. And when you have case carriers that have 18, 20, and then you have people not showing up, you have parents, sometimes they don't show up, or you have key stakeholders, teachers of record, they miss, they're in a meeting, you have to do that whole thing again. So it's definitely worth every penny that we recognize this extra work for our ex-ed educators.
Okay. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. I also would like to increase the stipend for the ex-ed teachers to $1,000 as Ms. Counts recommended per semester. And I also, I want some clarification, if I may, Dr. Trujillo, on the $15 per day. Is that just for these hard to fill schools, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so that number is basically you took the number of requests and multiplied it by 15. So that's not necessarily what we're going to be paying every day for the subs, but that's, if all the requests are filled, then that's what we would be paying per
If all
day,
the requests
right?
are filled.
So, yeah. And, $15 per day just doesn't seem like enough. It's kind of lackluster, and you can't even really get a decent meal for 15 anymore. And I wonder if we can bump that up to $25 per day.
So I will just say that my concern is we're starting to get in the territory of what a fully certified teacher makes on a daily basis. And just like we do with our classified ranks, where we try with decompressing salary schedules to try to maintain a distance between job grades and steps, I think that sort of a substantial raise takes us into the territory of what a first-year teacher may start to make here in TUSD. When you're starting to get upwards of $180 a day or $175 a day. So 15 is something that we wanted to recognize that might be an additional incentive for somebody to take assignments. It's an extra, if somebody's working 5 days a week, that's an extra $75 a week. That's pretty good in terms of what you could pull down monthly if you choose to do 5 days a week, and then going to schools that traditionally have had struggles with fill rates. So that's our proposal on the table.
It's definitely not nothing, but is it going to be enough to increase the percentage rate at these hard-to-fill schools?
Well, here's the nice thing is we can check every 9 weeks, and that's our goal, is to actually be back here second quarter and say this is what the last 9 weeks look like. You did 15. Let's see if these fill rates jumped up a little bit. Let's check the status of schools that we know struggled last year. Did it move the needle? And we may need to have the conversation about maybe bump into 20 or 25. So that's something we're going to commit to coming back quarterly. We want to bring consistency and clarity to the subforce to know that, the sub-working force to know that tonight, this is where we're struggling, this is where we're having problems, this is what we're going to do to incentivize more assignments. We're not going to come back September 9th and say, now we have a different set of schools. We want to watch this for the first quarter and then come back and say, do we still look at these schools as hard to fill for second quarter, or is it a different set of schools that we're struggling with? So that's really what we want to commit to doing.
Okay, well, I'm looking at the slide too, and like Pister in the 6 days of school, they needed 103 subs. And so I don't want to leave these 8 schools for, however many weeks it takes us to decide if it's working. I just want us to make sure that we're taking care of these schools. And I think the best way to do that is to just increase the additional day rate just by $10. It's not that much. And I see your point about, wanting to keep the rates separate from the, initial pay of a teacher to a sub, but, there's an immediate need at these schools, and I just don't think $15 a day is going to be incentive enough. I would like to increase that to 25. Is any board member in agreement with me? Anyone?
I understand where you're coming from, Ms. Shaw, and I do appreciate it, but I'm wondering if, I do afraid that it does start running up into new teachers, and that starts looking at it. And I know we're talking about subs, but there's that can be a lot of contention. Is it preferable to splitting the difference, just an extra $5? Is that still a little too much right now, and you just prefer to start at the 15 and then work up?
I can say this, that this governing board has gone in and adjusted this wage a couple of different times, and money has not solved the problem. You've brought them into the 120s for long-term work. They're now into the 140s. It doesn't seem to be solving the problems here. Maybe this little boost, this is why I would rather try this boost. Okay, $15, it could address some extra expenses that you may incur driving to some of the furthest reaches of the district. Let's see, is that the barrier? If it's not, we may have to go back to the drawing table and see what is. But I think that we've shown with these rate adjustments that it hasn't necessarily been the most effective. Any Southern Arizona district, we're all struggling. I had an opportunity to do our quarterly meeting with the Pima County superintendents last week. We're all struggling with sub-coverage. We're chasing the same talent, the same personnel, and we're trying to be as competitive as we can. TUSD's at a little bit of a disadvantage because we're 225 square miles. And so when you're smaller and you're more nimble, like a Flowing Wells, it's a tighter community, you have a tighter circuit of subs. We have larger distances to cover. And so you've got the distance, you've got the fuel, you've got the gas, and all of that. So we're hoping that this daily bump might make a little bit of a difference, but wholesale additional dollars to the standing daily rate of pay, we're still seeing these percentages as troubling.
Okay. Any other discussion? Ms. Counts?
It's just a logistical question. Is it very obvious on our site that there is that pay differential for these different schools? These hard-to-fill schools, is it really obvious for the subs to see
We're going to
which
make
schools
it, we're
that-
going to make it very obvious. Like,
Okay.
Talk to communications about, kind of blasting something on the front page.
Okay.
Interested in subbing, here's some new rates.
Yeah, okay. I just think that, I mean, I don't want to be spinning our wheels if it's, something simple like that. That would be helpful. Okay.
Dr. Shaw?
And another logistical question, for the sub rate approval, are we looking to do this retro from the start of the school year? Are we looking to start it just tomorrow, or when are we looking to get the additional pay if approved tonight started?
Well, the numbers that we ran is starting immediately. So it's a different total. So if you look here, this is 47,460. That's assuming we're starting it. It's a different total if we do retro. It's not going to break the bank. I would recommend that we do retro because we see we're not dealing with a large amount. And as a governing board member Shaw said, that's an assumption that everybody's going to take every job. So I think it's doable to do it retro.
From the start
Might
of the
make it
school
more
year.
attractive, absolutely.
Okay.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, Ms. Grijalva.
I'll go ahead and move the item as presented.
I'll second.
Are we just talking about the sub one, or are we talking about both sub and ex ed?
Well, that's a good question.
Want us to take them separately, or can we take them together?
It's up, I guess we can, I guess we can
I
take
would
it
like to do
together.
it separately.
Okay, we can do them separately.
So
But
the ex ed teacher, I'd like to move the ex ed teacher transition stipend.
To of 1,000?
Yes, please.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. And then, Ms. Grijalva, are you,
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and move the hard to fill daily rate for subs, the change.
okay,
I'll second.
all right.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yeah.
I would like to recommend that when we have two items like this that are not necessarily related and we have to do two separate votes, that we have two separate items. I feel like we might get into trouble at some point if we forget and, it wasn't clear what we voted on. And so it would be much more transparent to have proposal for supplemental compensation, hard to fill daily subs, proposal for supplemental compensation, ex ed teacher transition stipend.
I can agree with that. Thank you. Okay, so can I get a roll call vote on that?
Can I discuss?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Shaw.
No, I've already said something, but I have more to say. Well, I don't think that any teacher is going to begrudge a substitute for $25 per day. Subs don't get the benefits that teachers do. And if we need to bump up our, teacher initial pay, then that's probably something we should do. Our substitutes work with Maxim subs who get paid 5 times, and teachers work with them too. And so really, I think that we should nip this problem in the bud. Let's add $10 and let's see these fill rates raised. Let's get these subs in these positions, and the only way we're going to do it is by giving them a little bit more. $15 is sort of an insult. So I'd like to amend the motion to increase the per day rate to 25.
So I'll just say a classroom teacher, fully certified, they're responsible for being evaluated 2 times a year. They're subjected to performance-based pay requirements. They're subjected to standardized testing. They assume a tremendous amount of responsibility as teachers of record. They can be liable in a lot of areas. They assume primary responsibilities for students with disabilities. A schedule is made for them. They're required to be at a location each and every day. Subs make their schedule. They choose where to work. Subs do not have to go to meetings. Daily subs are not responsible for attending professional development. They're certainly welcome. Will go if they want. They don't have to, they're not held accountable for standardized testing. They're not held accountable for a lot of the accountability measures that are imposed by ADE, like a fully certified teacher, which is primarily why we try to keep a distance between the daily rates of pay. We certainly are about more compensation for these locations to make these jobs a lot more attractive. But as I stated before, we've adjusted rates a couple of different times now, and I don't think we're seeing the results that we thought that we were going to see with wholesale adjustments to both daily rate and long-term rate of pay. So maybe with this bump, that can be retro and say, if you served at these schools, we're going to go back and we're going to retro pay you, and then going forward, we want you to continue to take these jobs. Let's see if that moves the needle.
Okay. Is there a second to Ms. Shaw's motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Can I get a roll call vote, please, Ms. Pena?
Dr. Ravi?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
I'm confused. Wait, Ms. Rose, I'm sorry. Are we voting on to add an additional $10?
Yes, that is
the substitute? Okay,
substitute.
thanks.
Ms. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Counts?
No.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes.
Ms. Grijalva?
No.
Okay, item passes with Ms. Counts and Ms. Grijalva dissenting.
Thank you, Governing Board.
Well, now we have to vote on the motion.
Yes, and now we have to vote on the motion to...
For XHEAD.
No,
For...
on subs.
On subs.
The amendment was approved. Now
Okay.
we vote on the motion as amended.
Okay, now we have to vote on the motion as amended. Thank you, Dr. Shaw.
Wait, I'm totally.
I know, I'm a little... Okay, so Dr.
What we just voted on was the amendment to the motion. So the $10 additional is what we
Okay.
voted on. Now, since that was passed, we go to the original motion
Got it.
as amended.
Okay.
Okay. So can I get a roll call vote on that, Ms. Pena?
Dr. Ravi?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Counts?
Yes.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes.
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes.
Okay. Item passes unanimously. Now we're off to...
Thank you, Board members.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo.
Ms. Rose, before
Yes.
we move on, I would like to see the fill rates, if we can bring them up. And you did indicate that we were going to be looking at this quarterly. So I'd really like to see if it made a difference in what the cost was when you bring this item back.
Okay. Can we...
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, we can do that. Thank you.
Ms. Luna Rose, can I just have clarification on our motion before this for the XED teacher? Did we approve the 1,000 per semester or 2,000 per year is what we approved?
Yes.
Okay. That was what the motion was. Okay, just want to make sure to clarify because I was confused a little bit.
And just to let you know that I will, for the board docs, for the board actions, I will get it all cleared up tomorrow, and then everything will be inserted tomorrow. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Pena. Okay, so item 8.2, Governing Board Policy IMD, School Observances, Patriotic Revision. First reading. Mr. Aronoff.
Hello again. So the next 3 items are all first read policies that all are related to new legislation that goes into effect September 24th. So we're starting the process now in the hopes of getting final policies in place as close to the effective date as possible. So this first one, policy IMD, this current policy is sort of a selection of the current statute, things that we need to do each day, like have everybody recite the Declaration of Independence, who wants to, or excuse me, that's 4th through 6th grade. Everybody reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, things along those lines. So we're adding kind of the rest of the statute, including what will be in effect September 24th, which is the moment of silence. There's new legislation requiring that all K-12 classrooms start the day with a 1 to 2 minute moment of silence. And so we've added that in along with other things that are in the same statute that weren't included just for the kind of sake of completeness. This is a first read, so if the board votes to move forward with this, it will be posted for public comment for 30 days before we bring it back for a second read.
Okay, board members, discussion?
Luna Rose?
Yes, Ms. Grijalva.
And we are asked to do this because state law passed, and so we need to revise our policy in order to match up with state law.
Yes, that's my
That's
understanding. Correct.
And if we don't pass this, just a question.
If we don't pass it, we still have to do these things because it's what the state law is. So
Requires.
Right.
Thank you.
I have a question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay.
So either Mr. Enhoff or Dr. Trujillo, does every single, okay, so I feel like this is sort of a moot policy if we have to adhere to it anyway. And since we have to play these political games, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Will we have to buy more American flags? Number one.
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of them.
A lot of them. So I'm assuming, so we have to get a flag for every single classroom and every single facility, campus within our 2,500 square miles of district.
Ms. Lona Rose, that's correct, but that's existing law. So.
Well, of course, but it just seems like overkill. And then, not to say I'm not patriotic, but I just feel like now the optional displays, I mean, I know they're optional. I just feel like, we'll vote this as a first read item, but it just seems just a waste of time and teachers' waste of time. I mean, they have so many other things to do than, chemistry class. I mean, does it really need the preamble to be on the wall? No, it needs a periodic table. So I'm just sort of rambling now, but I will let any of my other colleagues speak if they'd like to.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, Ms. Grijalva.
Does it require a specific size flag?
It does. It has to be at least 2 feet by 3 feet.
So this is an unfunded mandate because they're not giving us additional funds, right?
That's correct.
So annoying.
And again, the flag piece is that's not the new piece. That's just in there kind of for the sake of completeness with the rest of the statute that we do have portions of in policy.
Actually, I'm going to go to Dr. Shaw first. He's been waiting.
I'll defer to Dr. Trujillo. That's fine.
So I just want to see, like, what kind of legal liability is there, for example, if a student or a parent wants to challenge whether or not the flag was made in the United States, because that's a requirement. Like, they have to be flags made in the U.S., or that it's not the specific size, or that there's a 7th grade classroom that is missing a copy of the Constitution. What, if you can just kind of talk about what the board could expect.
I don't know if we want to get into conversations about potential liability during the public meeting, or if we want to...
Not that detailed, but could it result in, a parent making a report, or...
I'll jump in there.
Just violation of...
Definitely, a parent can make a report, and has happened in other states where I have worked that had similar laws. The other potential is, some kind of investigation and report by the Department of Education. Although I don't see that as being, I think we'd get a notice on that before there was anything that actually happened from it. But I have worked with enforcement of this same law in Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. I just wanted to make sure we get some kind of notice like we do with other issues, so we can fix whatever. Okay.
Dr. Shaw.
So I think my confusion here is on the paragraph, students whose parents have informed the school they are not to take part in the patriotic observances will be expected to observe the courtesy of not disturbing others. So what is the alternative curriculum or alternative time for the students for the parents that don't want that to happen? So for example, if a parent wants to keep basic information about the student's body from how the body works from them, we create a whole separate curriculum, and that's what we did when we did the family life curriculum. But for here, I just did the math. If my preschoolers start kindergarten next year, they get 880 days a year, 2 minutes a day, 13 years. That's 80 hours of their time going into moments of silence. 78 hours. 78 hours is what I calculated. So what is the alternative curriculum for them if parents decide that they don't want them to observe this? And why aren't we creating that if we create it for other situations where parents object to the curriculum or what's going on in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, I think the guidance from the statute is actually that the parent should speak with their child about sort of how to spend the 1 to 2 minutes of the moment of silence. Our teachers and our staff are not allowed to tell students what to do with that moment of silence. But that language is, I think, simply meant to say that while other, if you are opting out, and this is the sort of thing I think becomes more relevant in something like the Pledge of Allegiance. If you're choosing not to recite the pledge, you're also not disrupting others while they're reciting the pledge. So in the moment of silence, while people are reflecting on whatever it is they're reflecting on or doing whatever they're doing, students are not interrupting them. They're respecting that time. But it's left to the family to discuss with their child how to spend that 1 to 2 minutes.
So that seems like a double standard to me. Like, why are we expecting parents who object to this to have to then come up with their own kind of talking points with their kids? But when parents object to other parts of the curriculum, then we create a whole separate curriculum for them.
That is a good question for a legislator who passed it. I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
So my other question is, and each student shall be provided with an opportunity to participate in the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag, as if we don't know which one that would be, each day. So I'm assuming that could a student get in trouble with their First Amendment rights if they decide to kneel? Is that, or can that be tied into like the moment of silence?
It could be both. A student could choose to do one or both of those things.
Okay. Because it's just, I'm just concerned that there's going to be a concerned parent or community member that they saw a child not standing or not putting their hand on their heart or kneeling, and then it becomes a First Amendment issue.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, ma'am.
I do have a question on page 2. It says optional displays. And any school or district may read or post in any school copies or excerpts of the following materials. The national motto, "In God We Trust." So someone could just have a big poster of that in our classrooms. I'm not saying we don't have some that do now, but it does cross over, in my opinion, to, the separation of church and state.
And so you are correct that a teacher could post that. That simply comes from current statute. I think that's 15.717, but that list is pulled directly from statute.
Okay, and then Dr. Trujillo, is it possible, that we can get a list of, well, not a list, but how much it would be to buy these extra flags? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, we can do a cost assessment, because what I see happening is that, we want to make sure that we're meeting the exact specifications of what statute has laid out with regard to measurement and now place of manufacture. So we can't guarantee that every classroom that you walk into is going to have the exact measurement of a flag that's called for in statute. So we are going to have to do a reassessment and a cost analysis that we'll have to bring back to you.
Okay, thank you. Board members? Oh, yes, Ms. Grijalva.
Just in looking, on average, this size flag is about $20. And then for the most part, where it says that you have to use appropriate placement, it's usually like a stick or something that comes out of the wall. So it's not going to be a cheap endeavor at all. And I don't know if there's any way for us to say, look, every one of our schools has flags. We can have, it's going to be incredibly cost prohibitive if, we're not going to get reimbursed at all.
Yeah. Board members, any other discussion? Ms. Shaw?
Thank you. This is really unfortunate that we have to spend all this money and, all of these things have to be added to the day. But I believe that there are opportunities for resistance for our students who aren't comfortable with it. Personally, I will be telling my daughter to, in the moment of silence, think about the American genocide, or perhaps in optional displays, a teacher can, under the writing speeches, documents, and proclamations, it's kind of like broad language there. Perhaps a teacher might display, some of the treaties that the U.S. government has violated with Native American communities. And so, this is opening up a can of worms, but, unfortunately, we, I guess, have to do this. Mr. Aronoff, can you please remind the public, though, what the name of the House bill that requires this for us, just so they know that we didn't develop this ourselves?
If you would give me just a moment, I will look it up. I had it earlier, and then I closed it, of course. It is HB 2707.
Okay, thank you.
And again, that's just the moment of silence. The other requirements are already in statute.
Okay.
And just to repeat, right? This isn't a statute that requires the board to have policy.
I'm sorry, Ms. Luna Rose, I can't hear very well.
Okay, let's see.
Is this better? Get closer?
Yeah, just like straight into the mic. Thanks.
All right, it feels awkwardly close. This is not a statute that requires the board to have policy. We presented this policy because we sort of have half of the statute in policy, but the board doesn't have to have policy. We just have to follow the guidance of the statute. So policy obviously gives employees and students some clarity on it, but those requirements will sort of be there whatever we do with this policy.
Dr. Shaw.
I have a legal question. So with the line here, a teacher or other school employee may not suggest an nature to reflection and so on. After the Supreme Court decision in Texas about the coach and all that, how is that enforceable, or how does that work in this kind of situation?
I mean, I think that inclusion is intended to protect against First Amendment infringement, so that none of our staff are suggesting to students that they use the time to pray or something like that. That instead it's simply between the family and the student to choose how to spend that time. I think it's meant to keep us out of First Amendment infringement.
My question was, after what happened in the Supreme Court decision in Texas, so how can we stop a teacher from imposing on that? Like, what is the constitutional issues here that after the decision that was made just recently?
I mean, a teacher still wouldn't be able to tell their students that they should pray with that time. I mean, it would be unconstitutional and against the statute. If a teacher chose to pray themselves during that time and their students prayed along with them, I think, I mean, it's silence. So I guess we don't really know what anybody is doing with that time. If they're praying aloud, then they're not following the statute.
If I can just jump in on that, the Texas case, the Supreme Court relied mainly, one of the things they relied on was their version of the facts that this coach who was praying with the football team was doing that not during instructional time or even during the football game. That was one of the basic facts that the court relied on. This is different because this is definitely during instructional time, and like Mr. Aronoff said, it would be likely an establishment clause problem if a teacher did try to do what the coach did during instructional time in Texas.
Okay. Any other board member discussion?
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, Ms. Grijalva.
So in this policy, it doesn't state, it doesn't state specifically that we have to have a flag in each classroom. Is it the ARS 15-506 that says that we have to have one in each classroom?
It does say display flags in accordance with Title IV of the U.S. Code in each classroom and on or near the outside of the school building during school hours.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm so sorry. I'm gonna eat this microphone. It says in the required displays number 3 that we will display the flags in each classroom and on or near the outside of the school building.
So on or near the outside of each school building, most of our schools have a flag. So why would we go through the process of buying new ones if it says on or near the outside of the school building?
I think because it's both. It's in the classroom and on or near the outside.
And on. Well, it says, all right. I just think it's going to be a huge expense, and no, I have a real problem. I appreciate Dr. Ravi analyzing that 78 hours of our kids' time is going to be spent on something else instead of instruction. It's just gross.
Any other discussion? So this is a first read, so are we voting just on to vote as is, or what are we?
I mean, the proposal is to vote to post this for
the
public
45
comment.
days, okay.
The 30 days, correct.
30 days, sorry. Okay, well, I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Okay. I move the item as count second, so roll call. Can I get a roll call vote?
Yeah, wait, real quick, Ms. Luna Rose.
Yes.
I really do think that we should send a letter to the governor's office. I mean, I'm not even being facetious. And say, is there going to be some sort of either compensation for the purchase, or is the state going to arrange for somebody to donate the flags? I mean, because I think that we should send them a letter analyzing the cost for our school district and what we're going to need. And if there isn't, and send it to all of our representatives to say, so this is the expense. So instead of buying pencils or dry erase or something, we're going to end up doing, buying flags and the hardware that goes with it, which is more expensive than the flag, it looks like.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
I'll just note that, again, this is not new. This is an old statute, so I would consider what the state would do with that when we send that letter.
Yeah, but I think the enforcement is going to be new.
Okay. Well, can we get a roll call vote?
Dr. Ravi?
Yeah, I think this policy is a double standard to other policies that we have and other things we've done. I'm going to vote against this.
Ms. Shaw?
No.
Ms. Counts?
Yes.
Ms. Luna Rose?
No.
Ms. Grijalva?
No.
So the item fails. So what is next after that? Sorry.
Next is 8.3.
Next is 8.3.
Okay.
Your current policy regarding this matter
So that
stands. Unadjusted.
Okay.
Unadjusted, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, 8.3, Governing Board Policy KI, Visitors to School, Revision, first reading.
So again, this is a policy update or revision that is meant to keep us in line with new legislation that goes into effect September 24th. This bill, and I should have left that open so I could tell you exactly which number it was on this one as well. This bill is HB 2025 that creates this new requirement in it. It simply is meant to expand somewhat and clarify the rights of parents to tour schools and visit classrooms. And effectively, the change is to say that that we are going to authorize visits by parents of enrolled students or prospective students, so long as that visit or the observation of a classroom doesn't threaten the health and safety of TUSD pupils and staff. That's the standard in this new legislation, and this is a bill that requires us to have a policy on this. It doesn't mean that we take away our other procedures for arranging visits. It doesn't mean that a parent can simply run into a classroom unannounced. They still have to set up the visit through the school. And it also doesn't mean that a parent can now disrupt classes. Disruption of the classes is still a separate issue. And so we've included language to make it clear that that if someone coming in as a visitor, violates any TUSD policy or state or federal law, for example, by disrupting the classroom while they're in it, that the authorization to visit can be revoked. So that's the added language. This is a first read. So voting on this today is simply to post it for public comment before bringing it back for the second read.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes, Ms. Grijalva.
So are visitors able to just record while they're walking through classrooms? Or can we add language that says threatens the privacy, health, and or safety of TUSD pupils and staff?
We have other policies that deal with recording on campuses that we wouldn't allow parents to just come in and record classrooms for a variety of reasons. So obviously, if you all, if the board wants to amend this to add language about privacy, it can, but this suggested revision is meant to track the language of the statute. So amending it would then sort of move us a little bit away from what the statute actually requires.
Dr. Shaw.
Thank you, Ms. Luna Rose. And so I understand the blue is the addition to stay compliant with the statute. I was actually kind of surprised on some of the original text of this policy. It surprised me that we're encouraging random citizens to go around my daughter's school and just walk around and explore, like obviously supervised and with staff, but it kind of surprised me to read that our policy encourages that. And yes, for transparency, we want to make sure our citizens, know what's going on in our schools, but it seems odd that we would encourage random citizens just to walk around, our kids' campuses. And so I'm a little disturbed by that in our policy, and don't know if administration have any thoughts about why that was in the original policy and how that's being enforced. And then I would also support Ms. Grijalva's point. That was another point I was going to make, is to edit the blue part for any visitors to campus to seek permission ahead of time if they're going to be taking any photos or doing any recordings of students on our campuses.
So just to respond briefly on the citizen piece, I think it's sort of meant to be a catch-all to the extent that someone who is not, a district, either a governing board member or employee or parent, there may be times when some other community member has a reason to be visiting our campus, and so we have that language. The standard about health and safety doesn't apply to your random citizen. It applies to parents only. So we can be more restrictive, and we can obviously, it's up to the school to authorize that visit. So if it were just a random person off at the street, the school can say, no, you have no reason to be here. So we're not just going to let you walk around the school. They can evaluate what is the purpose of this visit, and if it's a reasonable purpose, then they'll provide a reasonable level of access.
So this policy wouldn't, like if one of our, I know many of our schools have now cameras and a buzz-in. You can't just open the door and walk right in. They have to be buzzed in, got a camera. So this wouldn't affect any of that.
That's correct.